Chapter 440, Ghost King 2. Ghostly Soul Snare. Fairy Violet's spirit instantly recognized the ghost technique she was suffering from. This magic technique was innate to high-grade demon ghosts and was used to attack weaker enemies. Enemies of lower cultivation would have their blood run rampant, and they would madly dance about without any control of their limbs. What a fearsome, damaging yin ghost technique. When she had originally heard the sound, she had regarded it as a common ghost howl and was now paying the price. Fairy Violet's spirit felt terrified upon seeing her body wildly flitter towards the ghost's sobs. Tai, at that moment she heard a man's voice. Although the voice wasn't loud, she felt her heart and soul tremble, causing her to collapse onto the floor with weakened legs. She soon discovered with delight that she had regained control of her body. Her heart relaxed, and she looked in front of her with a grateful expression where Han Li, the source of the voice, stood. Fellow Taoist Violet spirit, use your cultivation to guard your mind. You were careless, but you cannot allow the ghost whale to take advantage of your distraction. The woman heard Han Li's calm voice in her ear. Yes, Fairy Violet spirit blushed and softly replied. She then stood from the floor with slight embarrassment and walked towards Han Li with a guarded mind. When she arrived behind Han Li, she unexpectedly discovered that Han Li stood motionlessly in place and was staring forwards. She followed Han Li's gaze to witness a scene that tensed her heart. In the ghost mist not far away, a thick black fog roiled without end. Flashes of red and green light would occasionally shine through, along with sounds of muffled explosions, along with the ghost sobs that had embarrassed her. Within the black fog, the black-robed devilish cultivator was controlling a strange, fire-red hammer that spouted out countless blue flames. The flames were currently fighting against an indistinct ghostly shadow. The ghostly shadow was surrounded in fog and was controlling a thumb-sized green pearl that released a pitch-black, profound yin qi. The black-robed man was trapped within the green pearl's black qi and appeared to be at a great disadvantage. As for the weeping soul beast that was capable of consuming souls and beasts, it was tangling with two ghostly silhouettes covered in green fur. Apart from their pointed heads and the several inch-long white bone prongs held in each of their hands, they appeared exactly the same as ordinary green-furred Xianxia, the Chinese hybrid of a vampire and a zombie. It was normally described to move by hopping. At that moment, their white bone prongs spouted out a stream of green flame wisps towards the weeping soul beast. In response, the weeping soul beast spurted out a yellow glowing light from its nose that violently collided with the flame wisps. After being wrapped by its glow, the wisps of flame were completely absorbed into its nose. At first glance, the weeping soul beast had the advantage because the green-furred monsters were merely attacking from a distance with the flame wisps, and they didn't dare to approach the beast as if they were fearful of its yellow glowing light. But in reality, the weeping soul beast was being tied down by the monsters and was unable to assist the black-robed man. Night-fiend ghosts. Upon seeing the two green-furred monsters, Fairy Violet spirit took a breath of cold air. Han Li's heart stirred. Without turning his head around, he asked, "What? Does fellow Taoist Violet spirit recognize what those are?" It should be correct. Although this is the first time I've seen them, they appear exactly the same as described. They are a particularly rare type of Jiangshi that are able to travel underneath the sun. It is no wonder they dare to brave the weeping ghost beast's power. As they have physical bodies, they are able to suppress the beast so long as they distance themselves from the weeping soul beast's soul-absorbing light. After all, the weeping soul beast seems lacking in skills. It probably doesn't have anything apart from its soul-absorbing light. After Han Li heard this, his face displayed no abnormalities, but he let out a long mental sigh. This woman's cultivation wasn't high, but her knowledge was far greater than that of a rogue cultivator like himself. Despite having read through many records during his days at Yellow Maple Valley, he didn't possess the qualifications to read through the truly valuable secret information as his cultivation was too low. As for when he arrived in the scattered star seas, he had purchased many records, but the information hadn't filtered or organized by a sect. If the records weren't duplicates, then they missed a great amount of information. He normally wouldn't look at them, but during this crucial moment, his own knowledge was shown to be lacking. If he made it out of here alive, it seemed he would have to pay a visit to the exquisite sound sect and look through their records. It was unlikely they would reject an elder of their own sect. As Han Li thought this, a change had occurred. The blue flames of the fire-red hammer had been completely enveloped by the black qi of the ghost shadow's green pearl. Seeing that his own flames had been extinguished, the black-robed man revealed furious alarm in the face of imminent crisis. It believed that by relying on the might of the weeping soul beast that he'd able to easily charge through this first trial, the vengeful ghost haunt. As a result, he had refused the others' invitations. But he hadn't expected to come across a profound malicious spirit with such skill, and had comprehended all sorts of attrition techniques. It had even taken advantage of a moment of carelessness to separate him from his weeping soul beast, leaving him in a dangerous position. Unfortunately, apart from being able to refine a weeping soul beast and comprehending a few peculiar techniques, the disciples of his sect possessed no outstanding abilities for confronting enemies. He could only stare on helplessly as he watched the splendor and might of his devil fire hammer weaken along with his will. Once he thought of the fearful consequences of falling in this place, the black-robed man's heart grew ice cold, and he became stricken with panic. At that moment, Hanley hurriedly approached, as if he were going to seize this opportunity to save the black-robed man's life. However, the proud black-robed man's delight soon turned into an anger so intense that he could spit out blood. When Hanley saw that he would also be placed in a dangerous situation, he didn't have any intention of helping. Instead, he watched their battle from a distance with great indifference. The black-robed man couldn't help but grind his teeth from the deep hatred he felt towards Hanley during that moment. Soon after, Fairy Violet's spirit had rushed over. As she watched the black-robed man bitterly fight against the ghost demon, Fairy Violet's spirit was flabbergasted as to why Hanley wasn't assisting him. Could it be because of the black-robed man's earlier attitude that he deliberately wanted to watch him die? Since she felt that Hanley wasn't such a short-sighted man, she became increasingly puzzled. Because Hanley had just saved her life, she found it improper to voice any of her suspicions and could only silently watch the black-robed man fight the ghost shadow. But at that moment, the black-robed man was unable to further endure. His flying hammer was engulfed in the yin-chi, completely extinguishing its devil flame and leaving it firmly trapped in midair. The black ghost shadow shrieked and transformed into a black streak of light before shooting towards the black-robed man's heart. Although the devilish cultivator's expression were hidden by his clothes, it appeared as if he was standing still and waiting for his death with eyes closed. The black-robed man clearly understood that, although his body's exterior was protected by defensive magic techniques, it would prove to be little more than paper to the malicious soul. His hammer could block it, but it had already been seized by the enemy, and his remaining protections could be easily broken though. Now, all he could do was wait for his death. During this time of crisis, Hanley, who had been indifferently watching from the side, suddenly acted without the slightest warning. With a wave of his hand, 5 streaks of slender azure sword chi shot out, arriving at the black shadow's vitals in the blink of an eye. If the black shadow were to ignore them and solely focus on killing the black-robed man, it would succeed. But in turn, its crystal core had a high likelihood of being shattered by the streaks of sword chi. The black shadow naturally didn't follow through with such a disadvantageous action. Its body blurred several times before returning to its original location. Its eyes stared at Hanley with an intense green radiance without the slightest glimmer of emotion. Hanley's eyes flickered with a strange light upon seeing this. With a flip of his hand, he took out a small, exquisite spirit beast pouch. He didn't immediately release the pouch. With his other hand, he shot over 10 azure lights towards the 2 green-furred night fiends. The 2 ghosts had quick reflexes. Having seen that Hanley launched a surprise attack at them, their bodies blurred several times, fading away into 2 wisps of smoke. A short moment later, they reappeared at the ghost shadow's side. They vengefully bared their fangs at Hanley, revealing their mouths full of sharp, black and yellow teeth. Taking advantage of the ghost shadow's shift in attention, the black-robed cultivator gambled the entirety of his magic power to seize back control of his magic treasure. In the next instant, he felt great delight and had it fly back towards him in a streak of red light. At that moment, Hanley's face froze and he loudly shouted, "Careful, there are other ghosts." The black-robed man was startled. In that very moment, a nearly incorporeal gray silhouette shot out from the other side of the ghost mist, arriving in front of the black-robed man in an instant. The black-robed man's eyes were filled with fear. It was too late for him to dodge. Unfortunately. Chapter 441, Ghost King 3. When the gray silhouette was about to pierce through the black-robed man's body, a brilliant white radiance flashed between them. The gray shadow quickly withdrew with a shout as if it were greatly afraid of the white light. The black-robed man, whose life was spared, remained stunned for a short moment before feeling delighted surprise. He instantly turned his gaze towards a flashing red light that appeared by Hanley's side. Hanley looked at the black-robed man with amazement. He had clearly seen a white light flicker like the blur of a huge diving bird, scaring off the gray shadow. Han Li was quite curious about it. The black-robed man still appeared unsightly. As he had just narrowly escaped death, he still felt great lingering fear. He felt great regret at having ignored the words of others, and so rashly came to the Heaven-Void Hall. But when he thought of the white light that had just saved him, he seemed to have thought of something and hastily reached into his robes, taking out a copper mirror stained from age. Han Li glanced at the item with marvel. The shape of the mirror was peculiar, and its spiritual chi was concealed. Could it be an ancient treasure? As Han Li pondered this, he heard an abrupt shatter. The ancient mirror had split into 8 pieces without the slightest warning. The spiritual chi that it contained scattered without a trace, turning it into mere scraps. When the black-robed man saw this, his eyes were filled with regret. He sighed and put away the shattered copper mirror. He then raised his head and watched as Han Li approached. He couldn't help but recall how Han Li had deliberately refused to aid him at the beginning and coldly snorted before turning his gaze once more. The black-robed man's action stunned Han Li, but soon after he seemed to have realized something and silently smiled with understanding before turning his gaze towards the ghosts. Fairy Violet Spirit also looked at the black-robed man and revealed a thoughtful expression. At that moment, the weeping soul beast had already rushed over to them. It climbed up on the black-robed man's shoulder and motionlessly sat there. It appeared quite clever. The gray ghost shadow reappeared at the side of the black ghost shadow. With many poofs, 8 identically shaped demon ghosts appeared from around the mist. Han Li recognized these ghosts from a glance. They were fierce ghosts known as Waiwu. Normally, whenever one appeared, it would cause a great uproar. An unexpected sighting of such a large group of them caused Han Li's expression to sink. They were horned and sharply clawed. Although they were far inferior to those ghost shadows, they were still superior to late Foundation establishment cultivators. They were slowly crouching forward towards them with cold gazes and were surrounding the 3 cultivators. From this, Han Li knew that a hard-fought battle was unavoidable. He bluntly gave his commands. "You 2 deal with the Waiwu ghosts. I will go and deal with the 2 ghost shadows. Delay them." Han Li's voice was deep and solemn. Although the black-robed man felt resentment towards Han Li, he also knew that the situation was grave and could only begrudgingly follow Han Li's orders. After all, he already recognized that he was unable to combat the 2 ghost shadows. Han Li taking the initiative to confront them was exactly what he had wanted. The vicious ghosts revealed an ominous gaze. When Han Li saw this, he instantly released the spirit beast pouch that he held in his hand. A glistening cloud of gold and silver light suddenly appeared in midair. At that moment, the demon ghosts seemed to have received an order and viciously pounced at the 3 while breathing out wisps of black flame. Without any hesitation, the black-robed man and Fairy Violet Spirit released their magic treasures and tools to block them. The weeping soul beast was particularly impressive. A glowing light shot from its nose and dragged a nearby demon ghost into his stomach. However, that was all it could do before the 2 green-furred night fiends used their bone prongs to once again tie it down. Han Li didn't pay attention to any of the Waiwu ghosts. He shot towards the 2 ghost shadows in the distance as a streak of azure light. The cloud of droning gold-devouring beetles were closely following after him. When the black ghost shadow saw Han Li take the initiative to approach them, its black eyes flashed with green light. It then opened its mouth and released a green sparkling pearl towards him. As for the gray shadow next to it, after several blurs, it disappeared from sight. Han Li frowned and expressionlessly stopped in place. With a flick of his finger, 2 bamboo cloudswarm swords flew to intercept the green pearl as azure streaks of light. Simultaneously, he commanded his droning gold-devouring beetles to scatter around him and to float in place. Bang! The 2 streaks of azure light were exchanging blows with the green pearl. The ghost pearl released a large cloud of profound yin qi in an attempt to bind and seal the 2 flying swords within it. Cold light flashed from Han Li's eyes. Forming a sword incantation gesture with his hands, the 2 flying swords grew several times in size, transforming into 2 10-meter-long azure flood dragons. With a flamboyant flourish, they broke through the black yin qi encirclement and fiercely charged towards the green ghost pearl. The ghost shadow's originally icy expression revealed a trace of surprise. Although the green ghost pearl was once the protective magic treasure of a fallen cultivator, it was rather average. But after the demon ghost had acquired it and tempered it for several hundred years with profound yin qi, It had long since become marvelously refined into a magic treasure of particularly damaging profound yin qi. So long as a magic treasure was bound by its qi, it would be continuously sealed and incapable of escaping. But for some unknown reason, Han Li's flying sword showed no fear towards being entangled by the profound yin qi. After transforming into azure flood dragons, the swords tore apart the profound yin qi, not allowing it to approach their main bodies. When the ghost shadow saw this, it couldn't help but become fearful. During its several hundred years of sentience, it had never come across such a scene. After a moment of hesitation, it suddenly raised its claw and reached towards the green pearl as if it were grabbing it in the air. The ghost pearl then flourished with brilliance and shot back about 10 meters before revolving in place. After a series of sways, the pearl transformed into a black demon tiger. The tiger was huge and had intelligent eyes. As it roared, it spouted out dark green wisps with bold and powerful intensity. But what was most astonishing was that the huge tiger didn't have a hollow body like his sword's transformed azure flood dragons. Instead, its body was corporeal and appeared quite fearsome. After a moment of shock, Han Li couldn't help but narrow his eyes. An artifact spirit. This so-called artifact spirit is something every magic treasure can refine upon sealing the soul essence of a demon beast's primal soul into it. During an enemy confrontation, the soul essence and magic treasure would fuse, causing the magic treasure to transform into the form of the artifact spirit with greatly increased power. In addition, it would also gain the demon beast's soul's original abilities. It could be said to be a shortcut to quickly raising a magic treasure's strength. But for some unknown reason, regardless of whether or not the magic treasure successfully refined the sealed soul, only one attempt could be made to gain an artifact spirit. If a second attempt were to be attempted, the magic treasure would be incapable of absorbing the soul essence of the primal soul. This was regarded by cultivators with great importance. If they had no urgent need to increase their magic treasure's power, they would spend as much time as possible to find an appropriate match and deliberate before conducting the sealing ceremony. During the trial of blood and fire back in the state of Yue, Nangongwan probably took the primal soul of the inky flood dragon with the intention of sealing it as an artifact spirit. After all, the inky flood dragon may have been young, but it was still a very rare flood dragon. That must have been why Nangongwan was so excited when she obtained it. Despite having slaughtered a great number of demon beasts of various ranks, Han Li had yet to see a spiritual flood dragon. This caused Han Li, who had wanted to use a flood dragon as his artifact spirit, to be rather gloomy. In any case, the odds of success for artifact spirit seals were difficult to predict. It was almost as if there were no predictable patterns. However, there were a few certainties. The stronger the primal soul to be sealed as an artifact spirit, the lower the odds of success. And if the artifact spirit's strength was too weak, then it would only increase the magic treasure's power by minuscule amount. As a result of this, a majority of cultivators' magic treasures do not possess artifact spirits. It wasn't that they couldn't find a target to their satisfaction. It was because the sealing of the artifact spirits had been an utter failure. Thus, when Han Li saw that the ghost pearl contained an artifact spirit, he couldn't help but be startled. Han Li soon calmed down and licked his dry lips. He pointed to his 2 bamboo cloudswarm swords, ordering his 2 transformed azure flood dragons to constrict the demon tiger. Before Han Li did anything else, he would first test the might of this demon tiger artifact spirit. His flying swords didn't have any artifact spirits. Despite having their appearance transformed to that of flood dragons, they possessed none of their divine abilities. Chapter 442, Ghost King 4. The huge black tiger's eyes ominously glinted upon seeing the transformed flood dragons that were attempting to constrict him. With a low growl, it opened its mouth wide and shot out over 10 head-sized black light orbs in succession. The transparent azure flood dragon was able to swipe away the first few light orbs, but it wasn't able to block the rest. With a mournful wail, the flood dragon was shattered, revealing the flying swords. The flying swords were knocked over 40 meters away by the remaining light orbs. The swords' azure light dimmed as if their spirituality had suffered damage. When Han Li saw this, he felt slight regret and hastily pointed at them, causing them to streak back into his body for recuperation. Then, with a wave of his other hand, he sent out another 4 azure flying swords, stabbing towards the huge tiger in a blur. The black ghost shadow grew impatient upon seeing this. After taking a deep breath, it released a long, deafening shriek. When the demon tiger heard this, it immediately lowered its head. Its neck became twisted and its 2 front claws dug into the ground. An astonishing scene followed. A huge protrusion began to swell from the side of the tiger's head. With a flash of black light, it grew to become a smaller tiger head. With the appearance of its second head, the demonic chi surrounding its body soared. The transformation of this two-headed tiger caused Han Li to tightly crease his brow. At that moment, the two heads of the demon tiger artifact spirit widely opened their mouths and shot out a dense, overbearing barrage of black light balls towards Han Li. Han Li didn't dare to be careless. He formed an incantation gesture and caused his 4 flying swords to violently sway in mid-flight, making them appear as 8 blades. With a burst of radiance, the 8 flying swords then combined together to form a 10-meter-long azure sword. When Han Li looked at the sword, his eyes flickered with a strange expression. He opened his mouth without hesitation and spat out a cloud of glowing azure light towards the huge sword. The cloud of pure true essence caused the huge sword to radiate brilliance and release a long, clear ring, before transforming into an azure blur. As it fiercely chopped towards the black light orbs, it faintly released the sounds of thunder. Black and azure radiance scattered upon collision, followed by a series of explosions. This display released an astonishing pressure. The huge azure sword chopped through the light orbs with unstoppable momentum in a display of divine might. However, the black light orbs were endless. For every destroyed light orb, it seemed as if the 2 tiger heads would just release another wild torrent. This scene caused Han Li's expression to sink. This was unexpected. As he considered using other magic techniques to strike the enemy or send out more flying swords, a series of slight fluctuations occurred about 30 meters behind him, where the elusive gray ghost shadow had appeared. Apart from its blood-red eyes, its body contained no other detectable auras. It seemed Han Li hadn't detected any abnormalities from behind him. The gray shadow glanced at the flying beetles surrounding Han Li. After its gaze flickered around, it silently pounced towards Han Li's back as a thin streak of gray light, wanting to shatter Han Li's gold core. It didn't care about the beetles in the slightest, as it was most adept in stealth techniques. At that moment, his body had already become formless, with nothing to fear from the beetles. Under these circumstances, it was confident its claws would end Han Li before he could even react. The ghost shadow's cultivation art was extremely strange. It shot towards Han Li as a gray blur at amazing speed without producing the slightest sound. As the gray blur quickly approached Han Li's back, the gold-silver beetles began to hum and swarm towards it. The gray shadow was startled. Before it could react, the swarm of gold-silver beetles had blocked his path forward and were swarming towards him. In an instant, the gray blur became covered in the swarm of gold-silver beetles, creating a silhouette of twinkling gold and silver glints. With furious alarm, the gray shadow trembled several times in an attempt to throw off the beetles. This proved completely ineffective, and soon his body began to feel an intense, strange sensation. After a moment of daze, it turned its head downward, resulting in a gaze of terror from its blood-red eyes. The beetles that it had disregarded were now eating away at its incorporeal ghost body. Although their bites took much effort, they were truly eating away at his formless ghost body, a mouthful at a time. The gray shadow became panicked and started to undergo continuous transformations. In one moment, it had turned into a pitch-black fog. In another, it turned into a scaled phantom. But regardless of the transformation, the cloud of beetles firmly stuck onto his body, and he was incapable of breaking away from them. In a short moment, his body was being devoured by at least several thousand exotic insects. At that moment, Han Li finally turned his head to coldly glance at the gray shadow. Without wasting the breath to say any nonsense, he released 2 more spirit beast pouches into the sky, summoning 2 additional swarms of droning, gold-silver insects into the air. The 2 huge swarms joined the existing swarm in devouring the gray shadow. The gray ghost shadow eventually released a deafening, fearful scream towards the black ghost shadow for aid. When the black shadow heard this, it revealed a trace of apprehension. It glanced at the huge azure sword that was deadlocked with the huge tiger artifact spirit and appeared hesitant. But soon, it narrowed its green glowing eyes before transforming into a ghost cloud and merging with the body of the demon tiger. The black tiger immediately released a pained, violent roar. Its body then stood erect and underwent a transformation, shrinking its forelegs and thickening its hind legs. One of the faces of the tiger heads became indistinct for a moment before turning into a shaggy man's face that was covered by dense black chi. As for the other tiger head, its eyes became even more brutal. Spirit possession technique. Han Li felt his breath go cold as he involuntarily whispered the name of this magic technique. This technique was similar to the greater possession technique that allowed one to enter a living body, but it had an entirely different use. Not only did the greater possession technique not increase one's strength, it only allowed one to make use of the original body's strength. It was only a convenient magic technique to control a body from a long distance away. There also weren't many consequences from using it. As for the spirit possession technique, it couldn't be used on other cultivators. It could only be used on demon beasts that didn't hold much intelligence. After possession, not only would the cultivation of the caster and the target's cultivation fuse, but their lives would be fused after a single use. If either party were to perish, it would bring the other party down with them. But what was most inconceivable was after fully making use of the spirit possession technique, an entirely new individual will be created with a consciousness that possessed the memories and experiences of both parties, but neither of their wills. Although the duration of the spirit possession was short initially, the more frequent the technique was used, the longer it would last. Eventually, the consciousness of the newly created individual would become dominant, and the technique would become incapable of reversing. Ironically, the lifespan of this half-human, half-demon monster was pathetically short despite its great cultivation. Its astonishing power came at the cost of consuming an astonishing portion of its own life essence. It wouldn't last long before it eventually expired. Additionally, rumor had it that cultivators that used the spirit possession technique would have their souls forever wandering the abyss, incapable of re-entering the cycle of reincarnation. This topic had caused many cultivators to pale while chatting about it. But fortunately, very few cultivators knew about the spirit possession technique, and even fewer actually practiced it. After all, it could end with oneself turning into a half-human, half-demon abomination. The appearance of the ghost shadow and demon tiger's fusion was exactly as was rumored of the spirit possession technique. However, this secret technique should only be capable of being used by cultivators. He hadn't heard that demon ghosts were capable of using it, but what was most astonishing was that he had done it with his own artifact spirit. Doubt was unconsciously written all over Han Li's gloomy face, while vigilance surged in his heart. Chapter 443, Ghost King 5. Despite being startled by the strange transformation, Han Li took a quick glance behind him and sneered at what he saw. A majority of the gray ghost shadow had already been devoured, and the last third of its ruined body was on the verge of being consumed. Han Li reckoned that even if it were to now escape, its origin chi would be immensely damaged, rendering it incapable of further attacking. The gold-devouring beetles truly deserved their high ranking among exotic insects. Regardless of whether they were devouring spiritual chi or yin ghosts, they were immensely vicious, but they were slightly slower when they were devouring the latter. As Han Li thought this, the man-faced tiger abomination was at a loss for a short moment before revealing pleasant surprise at being awakened. It looked at Han Li, the ghost shadow being devoured behind him, and then looked at his own body. It started laughing with an extremely hoarse voice and a freakish smile. The laughter gradually grew louder and continued as if there were no end. The nearby ghost mist eventually started to roil from the laugh's vibrations. Han Li didn't seem to mind this and only focused his cold eyes on the tiger abomination's movements. But after a short moment, Han Li's face grew pale, and his expression became grave. The tiger abomination's weird laughter not only grew increasingly louder, but it also became more resounding and filled with chi. Even after using the great development technique to guard his mind, Han Li began to feel dizzy, as if countless claps of thunder roared past his ears. Not good. As Han Li was carefully observing the abomination, he seemed to have recalled something, and his expression greatly changed. Han Li hastily turned his head to find an alarming scene. The gray ghost shadow had unexpectedly disappeared without a trace, and his thousands of gold-devouring beetles were powerlessly lying on the ground, occasionally flapping their wings. They no longer had the vigor to continue devouring ghosts. In his annoyance, Han Li hastily took out several spirit beast pouches and quickly stored the incapacitated gold-devouring beetles into them. While still enduring the deafening laughter, he turned his head to look at the others fight. He was initially astonished by what he saw, but soon grew relieved. Fairy Violet's spirit and that black-robed man were in a fierce battle against the phantoms. Although the black-robed man's cultivation was far superior to the ghost's, he didn't have an overwhelming advantage due to the nature of his techniques and his greatly weakened magic treasure. As for Fairy Violet's spirit, she had concealed herself away in a glow of radiance by using a stone tablet, and was only attempting to defend herself. Han Li was slightly baffled when the two were unaffected by the strange laughter, but after some consideration, Han Li realized why. It seemed that the power of the two-headed abomination's strange laughter was limited to a small area. As a result, it was able to exert such an astonishing amount of power that his incredibly durable gold-devouring beetles were incapacitated, causing them to fall off the gray ghost shadow. Although these exotic insects had yet to reach their full potential, the might of the strange light could clearly be seen. Were it not for the soul-concentrating effect of the great development technique, Han Li feared he would have also become incapacitated by the strange laughter, only able to await his inevitable death. The more he thought of it, the more he became aghast. Han Li had already determined that despite not being at the nascent soul stage, it was definitely no weaker than a late core formation cultivator. Han Li suspected that this being was a so-called ghost king. At that moment, the abomination seemed to notice that the strange laughter had no effect on Han Li, who was still steadily standing. It eventually stopped and eerily stared at Han Li with its two heads. Han Li felt uneasy upon looking at it, but he narrowed his eyes and boldly met its gaze. At that moment, the badly damaged gray shadow appeared behind the abomination and shot straight towards the two-headed abomination without any signs of stopping. Han Li was at a loss from the sight, and his gaze continuously shifted. The ghost shadow has already transformed. Why wasn't it hiding from a distance? Why did it come back? While Han Li was bewildered, he saw something he was incapable of imagining. The eyes of the abomination strangely glinted, and it grabbed a hold of the gray ghost shadow. The black tiger head then widely opened its mouth and quickly swallowed down the gray shadow. Han Li watched with complete astonishment, but what occurred next immediately dispelled Han Li's doubts. As the abomination roared to the sky, another protrusion appeared at its neck. It emerged to reveal a tiger head with a gray human face. The face of the third tiger head resembled that of an average woman. After a moment of shock, Han Li quickly restored his calm expression. After the gray tiger head appeared, it narrowed its eyes, and its face became deathly pale as if it were heavily injured. But not long after, it opened its blood-red eyes and stared at Han Li with an expression of deep resentment. When Han Li saw this, his heart trembled, and he felt goosebumps arise all over his body. At this moment, the head with the man's face at the center let out a fierce hiss. Afterwards, the abomination started to fearlessly approach Han Li with large strides. A black light flashed from its body with every step, causing its body to swell. After about a dozen steps, the abomination was as tall as a 3-story building. The sight caused Han Li to blanch. Without taking the time to think, Han Li waved his arms, summoning over 100 huge ape puppets around him. The puppets simultaneously opened their mouths and flooded the sky with beams of various colored light. Han Li then pointed at the huge azure sword, having it join the assault as a long blur of frightening speed and astonishing pressure. When the three-headed abomination saw this, the middle head revealed a trace of astonishment, but it soon sneered. The left and right head widely opened their mouths. While the pure tiger head began spouting out orbs of black light, the gray woman's head filled the entire area with wisps of gray ghost flames. The combined attack of the flame wisps and light orbs managed to forcibly block the many light beams. Although a few of the beams managed to pierce through, the few staggered light beams were completely ineffective. Han Li unconsciously frowned. With a cold glint in his eyes, he suddenly cast a sword incantation seal. Shining with even brighter radiance, the azure streak traveled with increased speed. Under the cover of the huge ape puppet's attacks, the huge sword instantly pierced through the flame wisps and light orbs with unchallenged momentum. It flew around the waist of the beast and attempted to slash through it with a flash of brilliance. But what Han Li saw next left him at a loss for words. The three heads of the abomination simultaneously released a bizarre roar and swiped its two claws at a speed Han Li couldn't perceive, resulting in the huge sword being trapped in its grasp. The two hairy tiger claws seemed unaffected by the sharpness of the swordlight. Although the sword continuously swayed in its grasp, it was unable to break free. Han Li wasn't sure what to do. Although the bamboo cloud sword wasn't refined for long and didn't contain much power, it was inconceivable for it to be caught with mere claws. Could it be that their claws had been refined into a magic treasure? Han Li's thoughts went off on a tangent. When the abomination had restrained Han Li's flying swords, the three heads revealed a malicious expression. The middle head smiled sinisterly before opening its mouth and releasing a dense, black yin qi towards the struggling flying sword, gradually whittling away the intensity of its light. Han Li's heart dropped upon seeing this. The abomination's methods were ruthless, and its cultivation was immense. If he allowed this drag on, it wouldn't end well. He had to take a risk and end this as soon as possible. With that thought in mind, Han Li couldn't help but turn his head towards the other group. The black-robed man and fairy violet spirit were completely focused on fighting the demon beasts and had no time to look in Han Li's direction. With that, a strange expression flickered through Han Li's eyes, and he slowly turned his head back. The abomination's left and right heads were still busy dealing with the intense barrage of his huge ape puppets, and the middle head was fully focused on spouting out black chi to corrupt his bamboo cloudswarm swords. "You're courting death." Han Li's heart soared with killing intent. Without any further hesitation, he formed an odd sword incantation gesture and fiercely pointed at his flying sword. Chapter 444, Black Robes. Han Li pointed at the huge sword struggling within the abomination's grasp. It suddenly grew still and started to sparkle with green light. When the middle head that was spouting out black chi saw this, it was stunned. Before it could even react, the flat of huge sword released several tens of arcs of faint gold lightning. The arcs of lightning were incredibly fast. In an instant, the lightning traveled up from its furry claws onto its huge body, creating a net of golden light around the abomination's body. The abomination's three heads simultaneously expressed shock, but before it could even move, Han Li uttered the word, "Suffer." The net of lightning covering it immediately ruptured. A scorching, blinding white light thoroughly submerged the abomination, leaving it incapable of being seen. In that instant, Fairy Violet's spirit and the black-robed man couldn't help but look over in surprise. As for their opponents, the Waiwu ghosts and the two night fiends, they appeared to be at a loss for a moment before immediately fleeing away. The two were alarmed at the scene, but after some hesitation, they merely watched them as they fled. However, the weeping soul beast took this opportunity to forcefully snort and absorb one of the fleeing spirits into its nose. As for the blinding white light, it persisted for some time before fading away. The tiger abomination was standing motionlessly in place, and its three heads appeared frightened. However, their expressions were completely still. When a gust of cold wind blew past, its huge body scattered into the sky as gray ash before disappearing without a trace. All that remained was the huge sword and a fist-sized tricolored pearl floating in midair. Black, green, and gray were interweaved in the sparkling pearl. Han Li let out a long sigh and waved his hand. With a dim cry, the huge azure sword dispersed into 8 blades and flew back to Han Li, with 4 of these blades fading away in mid-flight. The other 4 blades obediently returned into Han Li's body and sunk into dormancy. The previous arcs of lightning cleanly exhausted the sword's entire accumulation of its divine devil-bane lightning. They urgently required long-term nurturing. Han Li glanced at the strange pearl. With several blurs, his body appeared in front of the pearl. After intensely staring at it, he started muttering to himself. After a short moment, a malicious expression flashed from his face. With a flip of his hand, an azure flying sword appeared in his hand. Han Li fiercely chopped down at the pearl with a flash of radiance. Pang! The pearl was chopped into 2, releasing 3 streaks of black chi flying away as if they were fearfully escaping. However, Han Li flicked a finger of his other hand and shot out 3 egg-sized fireballs towards them. Puff, puff, puff. The 3 strands of black chi faintly released miserable wails upon being struck by the fireballs before they were dissolved by the flames. These demon ghosts were extremely devious. They had hid away within the magic treasure and attempted to lure him into grabbing it. Had he fallen for it, he would have been in an inescapable confrontation for control of his body. However, this was something he had earlier anticipated, when the body of the tiger abomination was exterminated by the divine devil-bane lightning. After all, with the gold lightning bamboo's grand reputation, along with legends of its devil-bane characteristics, it would be truly heaven-defying if a full discharge of the 4 swords were unable to extinguish a demon ghost. It was because he had this trump card that he so calmly and confidently entered the ghost mist. Despite having felt incredibly baffled when faced against the fused ghost demons, he was able to keep calm particularly because of this. Naturally, he had originally refrained from using the divine devil-bane lightning since the black-robed man and fairy violet spirit were nearby. However, he hadn't expected the fused form of the tiger abomination to be extraordinarily ferocious. When it had foolishly used its claws to grab hold of his bamboo cloudswarm swords, he naturally couldn't let go of such a great opportunity to use his divine devil-bane lightning. With that, he erased a monster that was no weaker than a late core formation cultivator from this world. Han Li lowered his head to look at the split pearl and lightly shook his head. He then turned around and walked towards Fairy Violet Spirit. When the black-robed man saw this, his face was full of shock. Although he hadn't been able to pay close attention to Han Li's battle, he had caught sight of the ghost demon's soul possession, transformation, and combined body. It had left him so distraught that he had immediately decided to flee the moment Han Li appeared unable to be its match. The three-headed demon tiger had appeared frighteningly powerful. But he didn't expect that such a monster would so easily be eliminated with just a burst of dazzling white light. He found it truly hard to believe. Could it be that he possessed a heaven-earth inversive antiquity from legend? He couldn't think of any other method that an early core formation cultivator like Han Li could use to exterminate the dreadful three-headed monster. But if this were the case, he could entice Han Li and obtain a great supporter to accompany him through the Heaven Void Hall. After all, he believed that only nascent soul eccentrics were capable of extinguishing such a powerful demon without the slightest injury. With that thought, the black-robed man's astonished expression gradually disappeared to be replaced with a complicated one as he looked at Han Li. As for Fairy Violet Spirit, although she was greatly amazed by these events, she had already guessed that Han Li was an unordinary core formation cultivator. She quickly calmed down and looked at Han Li with a smile. Senior Han's abilities are truly remarkable. He was able to effortlessly exterminate such a dreadful ghost demon. It seems I was truly fortunate to have teleported together with Senior, Fairy Violet Spirit gracefully said. When Han Li heard this, he insipidly denied, effortlessly. That wasn't effortless in the slightest. Senior is truly modest. Fairy Violet Spirit's eyes were glowing with humor. It was obvious that she believed Han Li wasn't being completely honest. What did fellow Taoist use to produce that white light? It was immensely powerful. The black-robed man spoke for the first time, but his voice was muffled and hoarse, sounding quite unnatural. This unpleasant voice caused Han Li's eyes to flicker with a strange expression. He looked at the black-robed man with a smile. After Han Li's smile faded away, he indifferently said, "So fellow Taoist is a female cultivator. There is no need to speak with a fake voice. Fairy Violet Spirit and I have already seen through it." Fairy Violet Spirit gave a charming smile upon hearing this. The black-robed woman was initially startled, but her eyes soon revealed humiliation and anger. A long while later, she spoke with a delicate, soft voice. "Since you fellow Taoists have already seen through it, I will no longer hide this. It merely made matters convenient." With that said, the black-robed woman hesitated for a moment before removing the hood of her black robe, revealing an astonishingly gorgeous face. Not only did this woman have incredibly fair and soft skin, but she had long, silky hair that was draped over her shoulder. She wore a dazzling garland on her head that added a mysterious charm, causing her to appear elegant yet unyielding. Despite also being a woman, Fairy Violet Spirit appeared breathless at the sight of the black-robed woman's beauty. But something soon came to mind, and she stealthily took a glance at Han Li. What she saw left her feeling somewhat uneasy. Han Li had been looking at the black-robed woman in a daze. His eyes revealed a strange, unclear expression. A blush appeared on the black-robed woman's flawless face. With both pride and gloom in her voice, she coldly said, "Has fellow Taoist had enough to look at, or is there something wrong with my face?" With that said, the black-robed woman's expression sunk. Han Li didn't grow angry at the rebuke, but neither did he withdraw his gaze. Instead, he let out a long breath and examined the woman with a mysterious smile. He appeared rather interested. Not only did she raise her eyebrows this time, but her face also grew cold. Even Fairy Violet Spirit felt apprehensive, doubting whether or not Han Li would act on wicked thoughts. But after some further thought, her uneasiness had disappeared. Due to predetermined innate aptitudes, there were far fewer female core formation cultivators in the cultivation world in comparison to male cultivators. Thus, a large majority of high-grade Tao companion pairs normally consisted of a man with core formation cultivation and a woman at foundation establishment. As such, the effectiveness of pair cultivation was not ideal for the male cultivator. As for the small number of female core formation cultivators, they attracted many suitors that believed themselves to be worthy of them. It made sense for a female cultivator, possessing such beauty and deep cultivation, as the black-robed woman to cause Han Li's heart to stir. Well, that's one way of looking at it. Chapter 445, Yuan Yao. Just as the black-robed woman was about to grow furious, Han Li's smile faded and he earnestly said, "I didn't expect that after a mere 100 years, Lady Yuan would enter core formation. You have my sincere congratulations." When Han Li addressed her as Lady Yuan, the woman's angry, embarrassed expression immediately disappeared. She hastily attempted to refute him with panic. "Lady Yuan, you're mistaken. My surname is Ryuan." This situation was the exact opposite of what Han Li had expected. He couldn't help but stare at the woman's flickering eyes. At the moment, the gorgeous woman's complexion had paled, and her hand was placed on her storage pouch. Her eyes were wide open and carried unmistakable hostility. The mood suddenly became strained, all of which originated from Han Li addressing her as Lady Yuan with a casual tone. While Han Li wore a slight smile on his face, he actually felt truly puzzled. As for Fairy Violet's spirit, the current situation was even more of a surprise. Without even thinking, she took a half step closer towards Han Li, making her standing clear. In terms of both familiarity and might, Han Li was the obvious choice. With an unchanged expression, Han Li slowly said, "It seems there is a misunderstanding. Fellow Taoist Yuan most likely doesn't remember me. After all, we had only met once before over 100 years ago." "We've only met once, over 100 years ago." The woman's expression slightly relaxed, but her eyes were still vigilant and she expressed doubt. The tension had been greatly eased. But after looking at Han Li for a moment, she doubtfully asked, "I've taken a good look at you, but I don't remember ever seeing you. Are you attempting to dupe me?" With that said, the woman's eyes flickered with cold intent, faintly revealing a trace enmity. Han Li felt at a loss, not knowing whether he should laugh or cry. He didn't bother playing coy and directly asked, "Over 100 years ago, did Lady Yuan go to the Sky Capital Market at Stalwart Star Island?" The black-robed woman blankly stared for a moment before nodding her head in recollection. After looking intensely at Han Li's face, she revealed a pensive expression. "Stalwart Star Island Sky Capital Market. I've been there many times. Could it be that you saw me there?" She seemed to have recalled something. "That's right. At the time, you were together with a beautiful friend. My martial uncle Crooked Soul and I met you at the edge of the market city." When he mentioned Crooked Soul, Han Li unconsciously glanced at Fairy Violet's spirit, who was aware that Crooked Soul had been his avatar. Naturally, when Fairy Violet's spirit heard Han Li mention Crooked Soul as his martial uncle, she revealed a mysterious smile. Although she didn't know the circumstances at the time, she was sure that Han Li must have been playing out an elaborate scheme. She couldn't help but find it ridiculous. But naturally, she wasn't going to talk about this matter without cause. Speaking of Crooked Soul, Fairy Violet's spirit had been wondering for quite a while why his avatar wasn't present at his side. Crooked Soul would have been of great assistance to them. After blinking her eyes several times, the black-robed woman came to a sudden realization and revealed an expression of disbelief. "Fellow Taoist's words feel quite familiar to me. Could it be that your esteemed self was at the entrance of the Sky Capital Market and was accompanied by a core formation senior?" Han Li bitterly smiled. "Lady Yuan has finally remembered. It seemed that I had given you quite an ordinary impression." Han Li spoke with a chuckle. The black-robed woman deeply blushed upon hearing Han Li, but now that she recognized him, she completely relaxed and self-consciously said, "Please don't take offense, fellow Taoist Han. At the time, fellow Taoist was truly." The woman found it difficult to continue. Han Li replied with laughter, "Wasn't it because my appearance and cultivation were too ordinary? It's no surprise you two ladies didn't take note of me." Han Li was calm and didn't display the slightest annoyance. "It seems I've made a fool of myself." Han Li's attitude had greatly eased the black-robed woman. After all, Han Li's current abilities were impressive, and she was fearful that Han Li had been offended over being forgotten. With her magic treasure greatly damaged, she was unwilling to casually offend him. With that thought, she continued, "I must also congratulate fellow Taoist. In these 100 years, fellow Taoist also cultivated to core formation from chi refinement. Your magic power is also so profound that you are actually capable of eliminating the Ghost King level fiend." Han Li inwardly shook his head in response to the woman's friendly words. He wasn't at chi condensation stage at the time. He had been at late foundation establishment. Had he not refined the 3 essence revolutions, along with the great development technique, he feared he wouldn't have entered core formation. However, this woman had truly cultivated from chi condensation to core formation in that time span. When he recognized the black-robed woman, he was truly shocked. This woman didn't possess particularly impressive aptitude, so Han Li inwardly guessed that she must have had a fortuitous encounter during those 100 years. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for an ordinary cultivator like her to have improved so quickly. Although he had carefully examined her previously, he was unable to see the spiritual roots of a fellow early core formation cultivator, as their body's magic power blocked his sight. With that thought, Han Li didn't stare at the woman any longer and turned his eyes towards the ghost mist surrounding them. Han Li smiled and thought to say something, but Fairy Violet Spirit spoke first with a slight frown. "Fellow Taoists, let us set off. It would be best to not stay here for too long. It would be troublesome if another fearsome phantom were to appear." Han Li silently agreed with a smile. The black-robed woman Yuan Yao had no objections, and the three set off into the ghost mist after confirming their direction. There was a place that appeared similar to a garden, but it contained nameless, rare flowers and plants. It had 8 pavilions finely carved from jade, with 30 cultivators distributed sparsely among them. A majority of these cultivators had pale complexions and were stained with blood as if they had arrived here after a bitter struggle. However, their faces revealed unconcealable excitement. There were even a few cultivators that were whispering to one another. Grandmaster Zenith Yin, Wan Tianming, and the other nascent soul cultivators were at this location. The two factions were meditating at 2 different pavilions. As for the 2-star palace elders, they were floating at some place in midair. They were expressionlessly sitting cross-legged in meditation, appearing as if they were statues. A dense, pitch-black ghost fog rolled around vigorously 400 meters away from where the garden lay. It was obstructed by an invisible wall, appearing as if they were 2 entirely different worlds. Suddenly, the fog separated to reveal a male cultivator calmly walking through it. This male cultivator wore green robes, appeared youthful, and had a refined appearance. But what was most odd was that there wasn't any abnormalities on his body, and his appearance was serene as if he hadn't experienced any battles on his way there. This strange scene attracted the amazement of the nearby cultivators. They looked at him with complicated expressions. At that moment, Grandmaster Zenith Yin opened his eyes and glanced at the male cultivator before revealing a disappointed expression. He shut his eyes once more and didn't pay any further attention to the male cultivator. When this male cultivator looked at Grandmaster Zenith Yin, his face revealed a trace of resentment during a moment of carelessness. However, his calm appearance quickly returned and he walked forward with large strides. He didn't enter any of the pavilions to take a seat. Instead, he found a remote corner and stood there with hands behind his back, indifferently examining the cultivators that were there. Seeing that Han Li had yet to appear, his delicate face slightly frowned, but he soon became expressionless. At that moment, unbeknownst to anyone else, a deep resounding man's voice could be heard in the youth's mind. "What, that assistant of yours isn't here? Could he have fallen to a malicious spirit? He. It seems the person you sought wasn't particularly worthy of note," the voice lazily said. The youth grew angry and he used his spiritual sense to strictly rebuke it. "Silence. Don't casually speak inside my body. There are many nascent soul cultivators here. If 1 or 2 of them were to hear you, what do you think will happen?" Chapter 446, Regrouping. "Humph, if they discover us at worst, we will just return into the ghost mist. Despite not being able to match nascent soul cultivators in direct battle, who can match the escape methods of us ghost Dao cultivators?" The resounding man's voice spoke with rejection. "What do you know? There are at least 4 nascent soul cultivators here, and they all have magic treasures and divine abilities that are particularly effective in restraining our ghost Dao techniques. If you want to die, don't involve me. Else, I'll be forced to break our agreement and exterminate you here," the youthful Bone Sage rebuked with an icy voice. "There is no need for old brother Bone Sage to be so angry. I won't mention it again. However, you cannot renege on our agreement to find a suitable living body. Why else would I have given you a trace of my soul essence and willingly allowed you to leave the ghost mist?" This person seemed fearful of the Bone Sage's rage, but in the end, he couldn't help but remind the Bone Sage of their agreement. "Don't worry. Since I need your help to deal with my traitorous disciple Zenith Yin, I will get you a physical body before I act. Furthermore, as fellow sufferers that were forced to cultivate the ghost Dao, how could I possibly renege on our agreement?" the Bone Sage indifferently said. Your words have truly put me at ease." After that was said, the resounding voice disappeared from the Bone Sage's mind. The Bone Sage sighed with relief, and then sat against a small tree before dozing off. After some time had passed, an increasing number of cultivators left the ghost mist with increasingly heavier damage. Quite a number of them had even sustained great injuries to their origin chi that would require many years of dedicated treatment, else their cultivation level would suffer as a result. But even in this sorry state, they all wore expressions of unconcealable happiness. After all, so long as they passed the ghost mist trial, they would still be able to acquire a few rarely seen spiritual medicines. After about 70 more cultivators arrived at the garden, the rate of new arrivals greatly decreased. In the coming day, only a sparse few cultivators had arrived. The youth that had accompanied Fairy Violet's spirit at the beginning was amongst them. His clothes were damaged, and his face was pale, as if he had suffered through hardships on the way there. Upon entering the garden, the youth swept his gaze past the garden and revealed worry upon seeing that Fairy Violet's spirit wasn't there. His expression was indecisive. At that moment, Grandmaster Zenith Yin and the Bone Sage both became uneasy upon seeing that Han Li had yet to arrive. The Bone Sage was the calmer of the two. Although he felt irritation, his face still maintained peacefulness. However, Grandmaster Zenith Yin was unable to endure. He occasionally opened his eyes and gloomily swept his gaze past the ghost mist, unable to calm down. In truth, this person's gloomy temperament would have normally prevented him from displaying his impatience. However, Han Li possessed something that was vital to his treasure hunt, leaving him in a hopeless situation. A majority of people didn't take notice of these actions, but the Confucian-robed old man that was meditating nearby had opened his eyes. With a light cough, he slowly asked, "Could fellow Taoists' unease be due to concern for someone that has yet to arrive?" The old man stared at Grandmaster Zenith Yin with doubt. When Zenith Yin heard this, his expression became calm once more, and he indifferently replied, "It couldn't be considered concern. It's just a very interesting junior that I've met once before." A strange glint flashed through the Confucian-robed old man's eyes. He said with a mysterious smile, "An interesting junior. Fellow Taoist Wu must introduce me to him. I too am quite fond of guiding inexperienced juniors that hold potential." "Old bastard, he is far too suspicious." Zenith Yin was extremely annoyed that Han Li had yet to appear and was unwilling to deal with the old man's schemes. As such, he bluntly closed his eyes and forced himself to meditate. At that same time, the resounding voice could be heard once more in the corner of the Bone Sage's mind. "Bone Sage, your assistant still hasn't arrived. Could he have been devoured by ghosts? Such an assistant would prove too weak to be useful." The voice's tone contained a trace of schadenfreude. The Bone Sage sighed. Given its temperament, it was truly impossible to keep him silent. It was also impossible for him to kill it, as it would prove far too useful to him. Until now, there also hadn't been anyone that had glanced at him with a baffled gaze. It seemed that their short talks didn't arouse any suspicion. With that thought, the Bone Sage unhappily said, "This person is exceptionally mysterious. Although he is young and his cultivation is only at early core formation, it is absolutely impossible for him to have fallen to any fierce ghosts. Even if you came across him, you'd turn tail and flee if your soul didn't scatter first. Do not underestimate him." Early core formation. Isn't Bone Sage underestimating me too greatly? Against such a cultivator, I'd only have to open my mouth, and his blood essence would already be absorbed. The deep voice spoke with disbelief. "Did you enjoy my devil-extinguishing arrow? What would you do if he possessed flying swords also made from golden lightning bamboo?" The deep voice grew silent for a moment before speaking with great skepticism. "Flying swords made of gold lightning bamboo? Are you joking? There was only ever one stalk of gold lightning bamboo, and you refined it into the devil-extinguishing arrow. How can there be other gold lightning bamboo magic treasures?" "Hee, you'll find out whether or not this is true sooner or later. And before you say I didn't warn you, apart from his gold lightning bamboo magic treasure, he also possesses a few other troublesome techniques. Why else would I, the Bone Sage, join hands with an early core formation cultivator?" With that said, the Bone Sage didn't pay any further attention to the voice and closed his eyes into oblivious meditation. The deep voice tactfully kept silent and was pondering whether or not the Bone Sage had spoken truthfully. 6 hours later, the Bone Sage now appeared irritated and wondered why Han Li was taking so long to arrive. At that moment, an area of the ghost mist rolled away and made a path, revealing 3 people walking side by side. The 3 were Han Li's party. As for the gorgeous woman Yuan Yao, she was back to concealing her breathtaking beauty with her black robes. Han Li was stunned for a moment after having seen that there were so many people present. He soon glanced at the scene and walked towards an uninhabited area without hesitation. Fairy Violet Spirit and Yuan Yao then gave each other a tacit glance before going their own ways. At that moment, a silhouette appeared with a blur. A handsome, azure-jacketed youth had rushed over and earnestly spoke to Fairy Violet Spirit. "Great, Violet Spirit, you're safe. I was so worried." After this was said, he hastily approached her and carefully examined her for any injuries. "Brother Li, I'm fine." When Fairy Violet Spirit saw him, she stopped and forced a smile. Her expression continuously shifted. After Yuan Yao took a deep look at those two, she went to another location with fluttering clothes. Han Li, who had found a lone place to stand, turned around to see Yuan Yao following him. With slight surprise, he immediately frowned and said, "Lady Yuan, we've already left the ghost mist. For what matter have you followed me?" Although this woman's breathtaking beauty had touched his heart, he didn't have any plans to work together with any strangers and immediately spoke with a cold intent of rejection. Han Li's blunt words didn't cause Yuan Yao to become angry. Instead, she sighed and said, "Please don't take offense, Brother Han. I've only followed you because I have no choice. Fellow Taoists should know that my magic treasure had suffered great damage in the fight against the Ghost King, and I am not capable of using it any further. And with the great dangers in the Heaven Void Hall, this woman only knows of Brother Han. Coming here was a stupid decision. Please do not leave me here to die." With that said, the black-robed woman's eyes turned slightly red as if she were about to weep tears. The scene caused Han Li to intensely frown. "Lady Yuan, since you've said this, I will need to ask some questions. But first, I'd like to make it known that I am not an upright gentleman, nor is my heart filled with benevolence. I'm especially unwilling to be ignorantly used in vain." Han Li calmly spoke as if he hadn't seen the woman's sad expression. "Fellow Taoist Han, please don't hesitate to ask. So long as the questions don't touch on any secrets, I will definitely give a satisfactory answer." This woman felt somewhat annoyed that Han Li hadn't revealed any pity or sympathy towards the fairer sex. However, there were items that she must acquire and she had no choice but to agree. After placing his hands behind his back, Han Li unhurriedly asked the woman without blinking, "My questions are quite simple. What is fellow Taoist Yuan's objective? Up to which trial do you intend to challenge? Also, from the panic you had shown earlier, it seems you're hiding something. Do you carry any great troubles on you? I don't wish to be involved in any of your quarrels by association." Preach. Chapter 447, Different World. The woman remained calm when faced with Han Li's questions, giving the impression that she had anticipated them. However, his last question caused her to reveal slight panic. She answered with a forced smile, "Fellow Taoist's last question is quite meaningful. What great troubles could I have provoked? The reason why I was so panicked at the beginning was because—" Without waiting for her to finish, Han Li insipidly interrupted, "If Lady Yuan doesn't wish to tell the truth, then leave it be. I have no intention of listening to any empty words." Seeing that Han Li was unmoved, Yuan Yao had finally revealed a trace of anger. She forcefully stomped her foot and left in a fit of resentment. Han Li's face didn't reveal the slightest change upon seeing the woman leave. He soon turned his gaze towards Fairy Violet Spirit, who was currently talking with a male youth with an easy expression. When she saw Han Li looking at her, she gave him a light-hearted smile and muttered something to the youth. After seeing that, Han Li turned his gaze away, but before he thought of anything else, he heard the Bone Sage's voice. "Why were you so slow? This master had believed you weren't able to deal with a trifling ghost mist. Could it be you came across a ghost king?" The Bone Sage's voice contained dissatisfaction and doubt. Having heard that, Han Li gazed into the distant ghost mist and indifferently replied, "On my way here, I encountered a fierce ghost. However, that didn't take up much time. It was the large group of Soul Eater spirits that came afterwards that wasted much of my time." Soul Eater spirits, the Bone Sage revealed an expression of shock. "What? Does Senior fear those things despite cultivating the ghost Tao?" Han Li asked with a calm tone, but his words carried a trace of mockery. "How could I possibly fear them? However, this old man is quite curious to know how you three managed to escape such a calamity." The Bone Sage quickly changed the topic. Han Li inwardly sneered as he casually gave an explanation. "Junior doesn't really have anything to say. We merely had good luck and were able to avoid disaster through a fluke." Little sneak, needless to say, the Bone Sage inwardly cursed at him. After a moment of silence, he had no choice but to ask a different question. "Fine. Since you're unwilling to explain, I won't continue to pry. The next time I'll talk with you, we'll go together to fetch the nine-curl spirit ginseng. Afterwards, you will lend me your assistance in exterminating my traitorous disciple Zenith Yin. No problem. So long as you hand the nine-curl spirit ginseng to me, I will take the risk of helping you. Han Li agreed without the slightest hesitation. It seemed he had long made up his mind. The bone sage was satisfied by his decisive answer. After a light chuckle, he spoke no more. However, he didn't catch sight of Han Li's mocking smile and the cold light that occasionally flickered from his eyes. Han Li suddenly felt another person looking at him. He couldn't help but raise his head. As a result, he caught sight of Grandmaster Zenith Yin looking at him with a trace of joy that reminded Han Li of a tiger eyeing its prey. Han Li expressively turned his head around and bitterly smiled. It seemed that avoiding a confrontation with Grandmaster Zenith Yin was impossible. Zenith Yin clearly had no intention of letting him go for a reason he was completely unaware of. However, Grandmaster Zenith Yin seemed to have his own misgivings. Why was he waiting so patiently and hadn't made a move to restrain him within the hall? Han Li gloomily sat down on a patch of grass and meditated. He had consumed quite a bit of magic power in the ghost fog and needed to recover to his peak state for the troubles that were soon to come. Staring from a distance, the woman Yuan Yao glanced at Han Li with unwillingness. While her gaze contained resentment, it also held a trace of loneliness. Although Fairy Violet's spirit was chatting to the earnest and concerned man with a smile, her gaze unconsciously turned in Han Li's direction as if she were worried. As for Han Li, he was meditating, appearing oblivious of the two's gazes. Time quickly passed by, and the next day arrived. At this point, many of the cultivators were already impatient. They surrounded a bare stone slab lying at the center of the Jade pavilions. With their experience from the first hall, these cultivators were particularly shocked to see the stone slab reveal a transportation formation with a flash of white light. Its appearance was exactly the same as the one from the first hall. At that moment, the two white-clothed elders from the Star Palace calmly walked towards it. After examining it, the old man with the kindly face slowly said, "This transportation formation will take you to paths of ice and fire where you will enter the second trial. Before entering the second trial, everyone will have some time to gather spiritual herbs and spiritual fruit as rewards for passing the first trial. If you feel that undergoing another trial is too dangerous, you may return here. In a month, a transportation formation will appear here to take you back to the main hall. But regardless of whether you decide to undergo the second trial or to return here, you only have 1 day to pick the spiritual herbs throughout the next area. Past that point, nothing else will appear, and you will be stuck there. To the best of my knowledge, cultivators that have remained there have never returned at the reopening of the Heaven Void Hall. As for the reason of their disappearance, it is still unknown to this day. So don't believe that you'll come across fortune by deliberately staying there." The white-clothed old man's voice wasn't very loud, but his voice was resounding and was heard by all those there. Those that already knew this were inattentive, while the others who were ignorant were greatly surprised. After this was said, both of these enforcement elders stepped through the transportation formation and disappeared without a trace. This time the other cultivators showed no hesitation, and each of them rushed through. After all, time was limited. They only had a short amount of time to search for the spiritual items. They had best make good use of it. And Li unconsciously turned his gaze towards the bone sage, before hastily entering the crowd of cultivators that were hurrying towards the transportation formation. But just as he walked towards the transportation formation, Han Li felt Grandmaster Zenith Yin's covetous gaze fall upon him once more. Fury and apprehension stirred in his heart, and he sourly grimaced as he passed through the white light. Despite knowing that someone harbored malicious intentions towards him, he was powerless to do anything about it. This feeling of helplessness awakened a feeling of an intense vengeance that he had forgotten many years before. After the light faded away, Han Li walked a few steps outside of the transportation formation and examined his surroundings, discovering a sight that left him dumbfounded. The sky was dark blue and was filled with clouds. An endless expanse of emerald green grass surrounded him, accompanied by a wind that carried a strong scent of plants. There was also a mountain range that could be faintly seen in the distance. How were they still in the Heaven Void Hall? This graceful environment clearly belonged on land. For a long while, Han Li remained in a silent daze. At that moment, the bone sage walked out of the transportation formation. Scoffing at Han Li's shocked appearance, he said, "Isn't it amazing? The first time I came here, I didn't appear much better than yourself. But this isn't an illusion. It is a genuine existence. With its abundant spiritual qi and its indescribable smell of pure nature, this isn't a place that exists in the outside world. He then took a deep breath and slowly savored it before continuing. This small world should be the result of a great divine ability of some cultivator from the desolate era. Unfortunately, those of us in the later generation never again witnessed their grand, marvelous abilities. The Bone Sage sighed and revealed a desire to witness the ancient cultivators. Splitting apart the heavens and earth by oneself, Han Li was overwhelmed with disbelief. Guessing what Han Li was thinking, the Bone Sage calmly continued, "There is nothing strange about it. The divine abilities of ancient cultivators far exceed what we can even imagine. But for some unknown reason, these ancient cultivators completely disappeared from this world. It was after this that our own inferior cultivation world came into existence." Han Li didn't further question this, and his eyes suddenly fell down to a small road in front of him. The winding road was overgrown with unknown wild plants. It was hard to discern, and it led into the unseen distance. In Han Li's eyes, the mystery of the ancient cultivators' amazing abilities along with their disappearance had nothing to do with the matter at hand. He'd be better served by addressing the matter at hand before considering any matters having to do with ancient cultivators. Chapter 448, Small Mountain. After following this road for several hundred kilometers, you will see a canyon surrounded by a barrier. It is narrow and very long. Upon entering the canyon, you will be in an entirely different world. Within this world, there will be two paths to choose from, the path of profound crystal and the path of molten rock. The path of profound crystal is chilling to the bone, and if you are not careful, your body will turn to ice. As for path of molten rock, it is scorching hot where one may find themselves easily turned to ash. Only after reaching the end of the canyon will you find the next transportation formation. Once you pass through it, you will have completed the second trial, the paths of fire and ice. As the two from the Star Palace have said, everyone will have a day to search for spiritual medicines before they must enter the canyon. As for what everyone will find, it will depend on their own luck. The Bone Sage finished indifferently. Han Li opened and closed his mouth several times and was thinking about what to ask. But when he saw the Bone Sage's expression stir, he remained silent as three more flashes of white light appeared from the transportation formation behind them. The arriving cultivators indifferently glanced at Han Li and the Bone Sage before excitedly flying off towards the distant mountains as streaks of light. They all appeared eager to begin hunting for treasure. As he watched them fly further away, the Bone Sage frowned and hesitated a moment before saying, "Let us set off. If we wait for Zenith Yin to arrive, it will stir up quite a bit of trouble." Then, without waiting for a response from Han Li, he transformed into a dark cloud and took to the skies. Han Li's expression greatly changed. He wordlessly turned into an azure streak and chased after him. Not long after Han Li and the Bone Sage took off, Zenith Yin, Wan Tianming and the other nascent soul cultivators each appeared from the transportation formation. With the righteous Dao headed by Wan Tianming and the devil Dao headed by Man Huzi, both sides stood in confrontation. When Zenith Yin appeared, he hastily swept his gaze around and felt slightly disappointed that Han Li wasn't around. However, his expression didn't betray this in the slightest. He was even bantering with the Confucian-robed old man as normal. As for the beautiful woman surnamed Wen, when she saw their confrontation, she coldly said, "I only wish to pick spiritual herbs. After I am done, I will be returning to the pavilion. You all may fight as you see fit, but do not involve me in your affairs." With that said, she turned into a ball of silver light and ripped through the air. Wan Tianming took several glances at the devil Dao cultivators and whispered a few words to his fellow righteous Dao cultivators. Soon after, the three of them wordlessly took off into the skies as a tricolored light. The remaining devil Dao eccentrics couldn't help but watch with widened eyes. They were caught unprepared and were unsure whether to closely follow after them or mind their own business. But before they could respond, the righteous Dao cultivators were already out of sight. When Grandmaster Zenith Yin saw this, his eyes flashed with a strange gaze. After a cough, he said with a wide smile, "Brother Qing, brother man, I will be taking my leave to pick a few spiritual herbs for pill refinement. Let's meet up at the entrance of the canyon." With that said, Grandmaster Zenith Yin flung out his sleeve and released a black mist. After the mist drew in Wu Chu, he disappeared with a gust of cold wind. Man Hughes's expression grew stern. As for old man Qing, he frowned with contemplation. That Zenith Yin left rather quickly. It seems his movement technique is growing increasingly wondrous. "Fellow Taoist Qing, if you are free, how about picking some Genesis fruit with me?" With our combined strength, we will have a higher certainty of dealing with the mountain demons guarding the spirit tree. When the time comes, I'll give you a share. Since your age is quite advanced, these fruits should extend your life by no small amount. Man Husey spoke to the pondering, Confucian-robed old man. When Layman Qingyi heard this, he was initially stunned. After his gaze flickered a few times, he replied with an embarrassed appearance, "Brother man, my apologies. I also have some important matters to attend to and have no time to accompany you. I will see you again at the canyon entrance." With that said, he apologetically cupped his hands and flew off. Man Husey's complexion turned an unsightly green. "Humph, do you truly believe that this island lord requires your assistance to acquire some Genesis fruit? I'll make a show of dealing with you two once we arrive in the inner halls." Man Husey muttered before launching himself into the sky with a stomp. Then, with several flashes of yellow light, he disappeared. By now, Han Li had been following the Bone Sage's black cloud for 4 hours, and the land beneath them was no longer the leveled prairie. It had been replaced with an expansive winding mountain range. The varied mountains made for a spectacular sight as he rushed past them. Enveloped in an aura of azure sword light, Han Li spontaneously said, "The place you spoke of is truly far. I suspect if we fly for much longer, we'll reach the world's end." A scoff came from the black cloud ahead of him. The Bone Sage bluntly said, "Do you believe that an item such as the nine-curl spirit ginseng can be found in some convenient location? If it weren't so difficult to acquire, we wouldn't have had the chance. Youngster, if you wish to acquire great benefits, you should learn to be patient." When Han Li heard him speak in a lecturing tone, his eyes coldly shined, but he remained silent. After all, this old eccentric possessed an immense amount of experience and was qualified to speak with such a tone. Although he was a bit unhappy, he wasn't about to waste his breath on useless words. However, flying for such a long time without even catching sight of the destination caused Han Li to feel uneasy. He couldn't help but grow more wary of the old devil, worrying that he may fall victim to his schemes when he least expected. Their alliance was completely unreliable. Han Li didn't believe that in the past, the Bone Sage had flown such a long way for no reason at all. Had he wanted to find spiritual herbs, he would have sought for them in a few of the mountains abundant with spiritual qi that they had already passed by. Even at such a high altitude, Han Li was still able to clearly feel their dense spiritual qi fluctuations. The spiritual herbs that those mountains nurtured were certain to be extremely rare. Han Li was very skeptical as to why the Bone Sage had ignored them in a previous journey to Heaven Void Hall. Uncertain of whether the Bone Sage seen through Han Li's suspicions or whether he had felt uneasy from the silence, the Bone Sage spoke with a hesitant tone. "I have been to this world 2 times already. I had fortunately discovered the nine-curl spirit ginseng the first time I came here. At the time, it was only because I was chasing after a flying shrieker for such a long distance that I even stumbled across the nine-curl spirit ginseng. After all, these immortal items aren't said to appear here. According to my assumptions, the spirit ginseng was coincidentally formed from heaven and earth after many years of nourishment from the dense spiritual qi in this half-sealed world. It was something that had formed outside the expectations of the ancient cultivators. He. And now it will prove to be convenient for you." The Bone Sage's last words revealed a rare trace of envy and regret. So it's like that. Although Han Li somewhat doubted this and was still keeping his wits about him, he felt somewhat more at ease. The two continued to fly for quite some time, before the black cloud came to a sudden stop. The Bone Sage looked down with a flickering gaze. He unhurriedly said, "We've arrived. However, you shouldn't become careless. The nine-curl spirit ginseng is extremely sensitive. If it feels that anything is amiss, it will drill into the mountains and disappear. You must take a moment of careful consideration before acting. Else, we will return empty-handed." "Is Senior sure this is the place? This is a spiritual object here." When Han Li swept his gaze at the area below, his expression turned odd. There was a small, unremarkable mountain lying below the two. Not only was it completely barren, but it was pathetically sparse with spiritual qi. It largely contrasted with the large mountains surrounding it. Han Li found it hard to believe that this small, desolate mountain was where the nine-curl spirit ginseng dwelled. The Bone Sage's black cloud slowly scattered to reveal his body. He spoke to Han Li with a mysterious smile. He, youngster, you're easily surprised. I was also quite astonished when I didn't catch sight of the nine-curl spirit ginseng, but this mountain is truly the place where it resides." Since the Bone Sage had said this, Han Li kept silent and bluntly watched below for any movements. The Bone Sage was no longer paying attention to Han Li and was gazing down below. His eyes suddenly glowed with a blood light, startling Han Li. Chapter 449, Ruse. The Bone Sage's frightening, red eyes shifted several times before their radiance gradually disappeared. After the Bone Sage's eyes returned to normal, he calmly said, "Correct, the ninth spirit ginseng really is here. Traces of its pure spiritual qi can be faintly seen from the surface of the mountain." Han Li's heart stirred. He poured spiritual power into his eyes and examined the small mountain with great attention. However, he was greatly disappointed to have found nothing unusual. When the Bone Sage saw Han Li's eyes shine with azure radiance, he obviously knew what he was doing. He disdainfully smiled and said, "Don't delude yourself into thinking you can see the pure spiritual qi of the ninth spirit ginseng. Only nascent soul cultivators possess a sufficiently powerful spiritual sense to be able to do this. Although my cultivation has shifted to the ghost Tao, the power of my original spiritual sense hasn't suffered in the slightest." The Bone Sage's words carried a trace of mockery. Han Li's face didn't reveal any change, but under the Bone Sage's unintentional advice, he started to circulate the great development technique in his body. After a short moment, Han Li rejoiced. He actually caught sight of extremely faint traces of azure light scattered throughout the mountain. Not aware that Han Li could clearly see the pure spiritual qi, the Bone Sage looked down at the mountain and indifferently said, "As I have been here before, I fortunately have a method of acquiring the ninth spirit ginseng. As a result, I acquired a few particular items from a small island along the way. We will first arrange a trap. Then, we'll have the ninth spirit run into it, allowing it to be easily captured." He then extended his hand towards his storage pouch and took out a dazzling gold item. "This is," Han Li looked on with amazement. The egg-sized golden ball of thread released a faint radiance, as if it had been specially refined. The Bone Sage scoffed at Han Li's bewildered expression and clutched the ball. With a flash of black light, long golden threads shot out from the ball and quickly wove themselves into a small, exquisite gold net. It was only the size of his palm, but its sparkling shine gave an unusual impression. The Bone Sage stared at Han Li and solemnly said, "The ninth spirit ginseng is something that can only be caught with an object of pure gold. Other magic treasures and tools will be completely ineffective. Take proper care of this. It will be used to catch the spirit ginseng when it tries to flee." Han Li raised his brow and pondered for a moment before silently beckoning to the gold net. Whoosh! The net flew into his hand, and he placed it into his storage pouch without a further glance. When the Bone Sage saw this, his eyes smiled. With a flip of his hand, he took out 4 earth-yellow flags. The small flags were layered with talisman markings that concealed their flickering brilliance. With Han Li's current mastery of formation flags, he was startled by the sight of the small flag. After taking a cold breath, he revealed a trace of disbelief. "What, Han Li, my boy, you recognize these flags?" When the Bone Sage saw Han Li's astonishment, he couldn't help but feel surprised. Han Li didn't immediately reply and rigidly stared at the small formation flags for a moment more. He then raised his head and solemnly said, "Is that the celestial black tortoise formation tool set? Apart from this ancient formation spell, no other formations are able to form such a powerful earth attribute formation from 4 small flags." Surprise flashed across the Bone Sage's face, but he soon regained his calm. "I hadn't expected you to be proficient in the Tao of formation spells. It seems that I've found the right person to be my assistant. You're correct, these celestial black tortoise formation flags were something I had refined on the way here. With this formation, we will be able to restrict the mountain stone in an area of 100 meters, hardening it into metal and trapping the ninth spirit ginseng. Since you possess knowledge of formation spells, I'll let you place down the formation. While you do that, I will be looking around for any solid traces of the spirit ginseng." Soon after, he calmly handed over the 4 yellow flags and turned into a black cloud as he silently flew down towards the mountain. Han Li looked at the flags in his hand and then turned to look at the back of the old devil with an odd expression in his eyes. After a moment, he licked his lips and flew downwards with a sneer. At the same time, a man's resounding voice was heard from deep within the Bone Sage's body. "Bone Sage, why did you give him the formation flags? I see that your relationship with is quite shallow. Could it be that you're up to no good?" This person spoke as if he greatly understood the Bone Sage. "What do you mean? I only had youngster Han set down the formation flags so that I can capture the spirit ginseng with certainty. After taking advantage of this opportunity, I will kill him." The Bone Sage sinisterly spoke with a chilling voice. "You're going to kill him now? Did I hear wrongly? I thought you'd at least wait until Zenith Yin was killed before you acted against him." The deep man's voice displayed astonishment. The Bone Sage grimly said, "That won't do. This youngster Han is far too cunning. I fear any more delays will only bring more troubles. In addition, this person understands my methods and will not allow himself to be controlled by me. If he were to by chance betray me to my traitorous disciple Zenith Yin, it would be beyond terrible. Although the possibility of this is low, this Bone Sage refuses to take such a risk. After all, I've already suffered betrayal once and will never easily trust others ever again. Also," the man's voice lazily continued, "also, you never intended to give the Ninkrel spirit ginseng to him from the start." "It's right. After spending so much thought into acquiring this spiritual item, how could I be willing to give it to another? Even if the spirit ginseng had no effect on my cultivation, it would prove equally useful for trade. And with that gold lightning bamboo magic treasure in his possession, he will inevitably become a great enemy for us demon ghosts. The sooner we exterminate him, the better. Besides, what do you think about his body?" The Bone Sage revealed a sinister expression as he spoke. The question at the end had startled the male ghost. He grew immensely excited. "It would be great. You must help me seize his body. But how do you plan to deal with Zenith Yin?" His question was slightly hesitant. "When I passed down Zenith Yin's profound Yin art to him, I left behind a flaw that I could use to kill and refine him. So long as he is alone, and with your newly acquired body, we will be able to exterminate him." The Bone Sage spoke with great confidence. "So that's how it is. But weren't you thinking of exterminating the youngster Han from the start? You still deliberately sought to ally yourself with him despite this. You really are a cunning fox." The man seemed to hold the Bone Sage's cunning in high regard. "You overestimate me. Before I came across you, I truly wished to join hands with him to kill Zenith Yin. After all, even if I know the flaw in my traitorous disciple's cultivation, having an assistant will be far more reliable. But now that I came across an old friend like you, I no longer have need of him. It would be better to kill him as soon as possible and prevent any mishaps later." The Bone Sage nonchalantly said. "You've put on quite the display. I had truly believed your apprehensive appearance at the Jade Pavilions. I didn't expect you were already planning to kill this required helper of yours." The man sighed and spoke with a complicated tone. "Humph, my worry at the time was genuine. However, I didn't fear the loss of assistance for my revenge, but that his gold lightning bamboo flying swords had fallen into someone else's hands. If such an event came to pass, it would prove to be disastrous to those of us following the ghost Tao." After a moment of silence, the man asked with concern, "You dare to so recklessly act against him even though he possess a gold lightning bamboo magic treasure? Are you truly certain of victory?" As this matter pertained to himself, he naturally wanted to know the finer details. At that moment, the Bone Sage was flying circles around the mountain at a low altitude. "What I originally imagined was that we'd use both the golden net and the celestial black tortoise formation to seize both the spirit ginseng and that youngster Han at once. I hadn't expected that he'd be proficient in spell formations. It was then that I was struck with a clever idea. I would hand the formation flags to him and have my plan become even more perfect." The Bone Sage revealed a strange smile and spoke with a mysterious tone. "Could it be that you've done something to the flags?" The man spoke with sudden realization. You'll know when the time comes. For now, we'll find the Ninkrel spirit ginseng. Otherwise, that youngster definitely won't be fooled." The Bone Sage deliberately omitted the main details, much to the man's dissatisfaction. "Nevertheless, my ghost demon cultivation art was something that you had imparted to me. I had originally thought to use it to search for the spirit ginseng, but I hadn't expected that my traitorous disciple would betray me. It has become my last hope." The Bone Sage's eyes flashed with cold light. "I wasn't really imparting anything. We were just taking what we needed." The man spoke with a deep sigh. Specifically references to the constellation, https://n, Wikipedia, org/wiki/black/tortoise. Chapter 450, Revealing One's True Nature. "Enough, don't speak any more nonsense. First, you'll help me find the Ninkrel spirit ginseng. Then we'll kill the youngster and give his body to you." The Bone Sage coldly interrupted him. "That will be no problem. With our great spirit-searching arts, finding that lone spirit ginseng will be a trivial matter," the man disdainfully said. "Then let us go." With that said, the Bone Sage's expression grew heavy, and he flung his sleeve downwards. 2 threads of black chi shot out from his sleeve. In an instant, they had bored into the earth and disappeared from sight. At the same time, a strange dim green light streaked down from the Bone Sage before quickly fading away. Motionlessly floating in place, The bone sage closed his eyes. Down on the ground, Han Li was playing around with the yellow formation flags with a calm expression. However, his gaze continuously flickered as if he were pondering a problem. Hesitation could be seen from his brow. With a flick of his hand, the flags flew off as streaks of yellow light, firmly inserting themselves into the ground. Although I couldn't find anything wrong with the formation flags, did you truly believe I wouldn't suspect anything? Han Li muttered to himself with a smirk. Soon after, he reached towards his treasure pouch and took out over 10 yellow flags that bore a similar appearance and emitted dense earth chi. A strange expression flashed across Han Li's eyes as he glanced at the small flags flickering with light. The bone sage's expression stirred, and he suddenly opened his eyes. The 2 threads of black chi and the green light shot up from the ground and quickly re-entered the bone sage's body. Found it, the ninth-girl spirit ginseng sure knows how to hide. It concealed its true body in the groove of a huge stone. Were I not careful, it would have been difficult to spot, the man proudly said. Good, I will go and see whether that youngster finished setting down the formation. Conceal yourself and be careful. Don't just appear as you wish and allow him to discover you, the bone sage solemnly exhorted. Be at ease. My disguise technique can only be detected with the spiritual sense of a nascent soul cultivator. In the coming moments, if you are unable to restrain him, don't rely on me for help. His gold lightning bamboo's divine devilbane lightning is particularly lethal to bodiless souls, such as I, the man spoke of the ugly matters up front. Humph, I don't need your help to deal with an early core formation junior. I naturally hold complete certainty in dealing with him. Also, you need not fear his divine devilbane lightning. A few days ago, he had discharged his flying swords in battle. Any remaining lightning in his magic treasures should have been exhausted in dealing with the ghost mist. As for when we had originally fought, he had released a swarm of gold-silver beetles, much to my dismay. Despite my great experience, I am unable to recognize them, strangely enough. Although I don't know specifically what these spiritual insects are, they should be fiercer than common insects. The bone sage spoke with an indifferent expression. Oh, without the divine devilbane lightning, he will pose no threat to me. I will act in accordance to how things play out. The man let out a breath of relief. Bone sage smirked and didn't say anything else. Although the bone sage held onto a sliver of the man's life essence, he knew it was incapable of completely controlling him. As this ghost had immersed himself in the ghost Tao for so many years, he was sure to be more experienced with the matters of soul restriction than the bone sage was, and he was both willing and able to break free of his restrictions by risking severe damage to origin chi. As such, the bone sage was unwilling to threaten him. After looking around, he turned into a black cloud and flew off in Han Li's direction. A short moment later, he found Han Li and dropped down. Although the land here could be considered to be level, it was overgrown with weeds. There was even a small forest of sparse large trees nearby. The bone sage appeared before him and calmly asked, "Have you finished setting up the formation?" "Of course I have. It's over there." Han Li leaned against a large tree and pointed behind him. With an attentive glance, he saw a large quantity of earth spirit chi fluctuations behind Han Li as expected. The bone sage inwardly rejoiced and took out a jade box from his storage pouch. He then opened its lid in front of Han Li. Han Li's nose was assailed with a strong fishy scent as soon as it was opened. He immediately stood straight and held his breath. With an alert expression, he took a few steps back and suspiciously gazed at the bone sage. "What's that?" Bone sage spoke with an indifferent expression. "There is no need to be overly suspicious. This is the feces of an orchid musk beast. Although it is rather unpleasant to us, the ninth-girl spirit ginseng is immensely attracted to its scent. So long as we place it into the formation, the ninth-girl spirit ginseng's avatar will be sure to search for it. After restraining its avatar, we'll be able to easily excavate the main body of the spirit ginseng. There will be no fear of it transforming and escaping." Orchid musk beast feces. Han Li glanced at the jade box in the bone sage's hand. He now saw it clearly. It was only a thumb-sized faint yellow lump. The intense smell it released greatly surprised Han Li. He had heard of the orchid musk beast before. It was a strange spirit beast raised by cultivators. It had an odd, fire-red horn that released a peculiar fragrance that placated souls, receiving much favor from cultivators as a result. He hadn't expected that its feces would prove to be so unpleasant. He was also completely dumbfounded that a spiritual object such as the ninth-girl spirit ginseng would be fond of it. But after Han Li looked at the bone sage's indifferent expression, he widely smiled and said, "Senior, please place the item in the formation spell. I will go and examine the formation flags to ensure everything is properly in place. Afterwards, I will guard this place and seize its avatar. As for the ninth spirit Ginseng's true body, I will have to trouble Senior to fetch it." With that said, Han Li cupped his fist and walked into the forest behind him. With some unknown method, he soon disappeared without trace. The Bone Sage was startled. He inwardly frowned as he looked at the earth's spiritual chi in the forest. After his mouth twitched, he raised his hand. A strange serpent of black chi flew out and flew straight into the heart of the forest with the jade box in its mouth. After placing down the jade box, it flew back towards him. With that done, there was still no trace of Han Li, causing a grim expression to momentarily appear on his face. He immediately flew to the sky in silence. "What? Are you actually scared of your own trick, the formation flags that you gave him?" The man's mocking voice suddenly appeared in the Bone Sage's mind. "Carefulness leads to no mistakes. I will first test the formation and see whether or not it is properly set up. Although the chance that he happened to possess Earth attribute formation flags is minuscule, I cannot take the risk." The Bone Sage spoke without caring. The man clicked his tongue. "If you were originally this careful, you wouldn't have fallen to this degree. It seems you've learned your lesson about that great flaw of yours, old pal Bone Sage." The Bone Sage couldn't make out whether he was sarcastic or truly praising him. With an inward snort, he didn't pay any further attention to the man's words. The Bone Sage floated in the air and opened his hand. A yellow formation flag appeared in his grasp. This flag appeared similar to the four that he had given to Han Li, but it was a bit shorter and appeared quite exquisite. The Bone Sage glanced at the small flag and lightly shook it. The flag immediately released a faint yellow light. After it twirled in the Bone Sage's hand, it pointed down towards the forest. The Bone Sage let out quiet breath, and his face revealed an evil smile. After putting away the small flag, he turned his gaze to the small mountain and flew off. At that moment, Han Li had finally appeared from the forest. Han Li's eyes coldly glinted as he watched the Bone Sage fly farther away. After his expression stirred, his body became blurred, leaving behind only a breeze. The fishy smell from the jade box was becoming increasingly potent, causing Han Li to tightly frown. All he could do was hold his breath. As time passed, doubts began to spring into his heart. He couldn't stay there for long. If the ninth spirit Ginseng wasn't duped into appearing, he could only return in vain. As Han Li was thinking this, his expression stirred. His spiritual sense detected a small object burst into the trees. Han Li was pleasantly surprised by this and immediately concealed his body's aura. He then stared at the jade box with complete attention. A yellow light flashed. A sneaking rabbit was floating outside the formation spell. This rabbit's body was snow white and its blood-red eyes were swiveling incessantly, occasionally glancing around. It appeared extremely timid. Despite this, the rabbit's pink nose was continuously sniffing in the direction of the jade box and would occasionally reveal a human-like expression of infatuation. What was an extremely unpleasant odor, to Han Li proved to be an extremely pleasurable one to this small creature. Chapter 451, Two-Faced. There was no doubt. This small animal was certain to be the avatar of the ninth spirit Ginseng. Han Li excitedly looked at the white rabbit and circulated the entirety of his great development technique through his eyes. The white rabbit's pure spiritual chi was astonishingly brilliant. It was undoubtedly a wondrous item born from nature. Han Li felt deeply moved, but he didn't relax in the slightest. As he rigidly stared at the white rabbit, his hand had already formed an incantation seal. The rabbit continued to stay outside the great formation before its two fire-red eyes glanced at the jade box several times. It was clearly unsatisfied with merely staying in place and continuing to only smell it. It was now coming up with a clever plan. Now that he saw the rabbit's intelligence, Han Li became increasingly careful and revealed a tense expression. After all, the ninth spirit Ginseng was most adept in evasion techniques. Were he not careful, he would have wasted all of his previous efforts. After the rabbit circled around the large formation, its two ears swayed incessantly, while still as if it were attempting to sense any oddities with the nearby spiritual chi. Han Li felt slightly worried. If the spirit Ginseng avatar saw through the trap and wouldn't enter the formation, he would have to forcefully capture it with the gold net. However, the chance of success would be pathetically small. During Han Li's moment of hesitation, the white rabbit's body blurred and disappeared into the underbrush. Han Li was left completely stupefied. During Han Li's bafflement, a white blur appeared from a different side of the underbrush. The white rabbit's speed left incomplete afterimages. It shot towards the jade box in an instant. After grasping the jade box in its jaw, it ran back without the slightest hesitation. Although the white rabbit's actions had left him in a slight daze, he immediately awoke. How could he allow its mere tricks to succeed? An arrow-like ray of gold light shot down from the trees, intercepting the white rabbit's path of escape. The white rabbit fearfully twisted its body in mid-flight and threw itself in a different direction. It was already too late. A barrier of yellow light had already surrounded it, firmly sealing it. The white rabbit's head knocked against the light barrier and was repelled. After rolling several times across the ground, it got up with a swaying head and eyes filled with panic. With a flash of white light, it turned into a fist-sized ball of rainbow light and immediately flew downwards into the ground. But when the ball of rainbow light sunk several inches into the ground, it was pushed back by another burst of yellow light. Now it was truly worried. The rainbow ball of light flustredly knocked against the light barrier like a housefly, but it was always met with resistance. At that moment, a streak of golden light shot down towards the ball of light white. It was in midair. It was caught completely unprepared. Then with a blur, Han Li appeared on the ground. The golden light then flew into his hand, revealing itself as the gold-threaded net that the bone sage had given him. The light turned back into the white rabbit while in the net, and it struggled to break free. Its figure became blurred, large, and small, but it proved to be of no use. The gold net closely matched its transformations, firmly holding it in place. And Li smiled at the sight. After he brought the gold net close to his face and closely examined the white rabbit, he hung the net at his waist. He then sat down at the center of the formation with no intention of disabling it. He then took out the flower basket desolate antiquity and placed it in front of him. He also released 2 spirit beast pouches of gold-devouring beetles and had them continuously spiral above him, forming a huge glowing cloud of gold and silver. And Li then calmly sat down and closed his eyes, waiting for the bone sage to bring back the main body of the ninth spirit ginseng. With all of this in place, Han Li hoped that this would tacitly tell the bone sage that it would be best to not shed all pretenses of cooperation and to sincerely hand the spirit ginseng over to him. He clearly understood that their cooperation would only persist so long as the bone sage believed that he wasn't weak. Naturally, if the bone sage showed any killing intent, Han Li would bluntly take the first move. Regardless of whether or not the ninth spirit ginseng truly possessed the miraculous effect of condensing a nascent soul, he was still determined to acquire it. After all, this spiritual item possessed great fame. He was convinced that even if it didn't hold any effect towards nascent soul formation, he was certain it still had other equally impressive uses. With that thought, Han Li unconsciously opened his eyes and looked at the white rabbit at his waist, the avatar of the ninth spirit ginseng. He was left stunned. It completely lacked its previous vigor and had grown completely powerless. Han Li's heart stirred. Its main body was certain to be in the bone sage's grasp. Otherwise, its avatar wouldn't appear so lifeless. Han Li then turned his gaze to the skies outside of the forest. After the time it took to finish a meal, the bone sage eventually flew over as a dark cloud. He came to a stop outside the formation spell and wordlessly floated there. Han Li expressionlessly stood up and stared at the dark cloud. He didn't plan on speaking first. A long while later, the bone sage's bone-chilling voice came from the cloud. "You appear as if you're facing a great enemy. What are you planning?" "Nothing. It's just that my cultivation is too low. I'm truly scared of suddenly having a falling out with Senior," Han Li calmly replied. "Humph, you really are overly suspicious. If I didn't plan on giving this spiritual item to you, then why would I bring you to such a faraway place? Don't forget that I still need your help in dealing with my traitorous disciple." The bone sage spoke as if he were suppressing anger. "Senior, I'm not sure if you know, but times have changed. Perhaps Senior truly needed my help before entering the Heaven Void Hall, but now I'm not entirely sure that Senior hasn't already acquired another assistant." Han Li stared at the bone sage with a gaze sharp as a sword. "What do you mean?" The bone sage's voice grew colder, and he faintly revealed an expression of shock. Han Li frowned and impatiently said, "Senior doesn't need to continue to feign ignorance. Why don't you call out to him? I saw him appear when he was looking for the spirit ginseng." After hearing this, the bone sage grew silent. Not long after, a man's deep, unfamiliar voice came from within the cloud. "Youngster, how did you discover me? I cannot believe that you saw through my disguise technique." "I have no interest in answering a stranger. Now I will ask a question to Senior Bone Sage. Do you truly wish to fight in a battle where both sides suffer, only to the benefit of Zenith Yin?" Han Li spoke with a mocking expression. Both sides suffer. You truly overestimate yourself. Although killing you would consume a bit of effort, I am willing to pay the cost. With that said, the dark cloud suddenly shot out a streak of yellow light, striking the barrier of the formation spell. The color of the barrier abruptly changed to a fiery red. The center of the formation spell began to release a scorching heat as if it were a furnace. Han Li's expression didn't change upon seeing this, and he lightly sighed. He raised his hand and shot an azure incantation seal towards the barrier. The barrier's color fluctuated many times between red and yellow before finally returning to its original yellow. The scorching heat had disappeared as if it were an illusion. "Ye, what did you do to my formation flags?" A shocked voice came from the dark cloud. "What did I do? I just did what you did." Han Li spoke with a noncommittal tone. "Humph, very good. You must also use my golden thread ball quite well then." The bone sage tone turned icy. "What could it be?" Han Li's expression underwent a massive change. He immediately threw the gold-threaded net from his waist into the distance. But just as the bone sage finished speaking, the golden net turned pitch black with a flash. It quickly shot towards Han Li as a fine thread of black chi and hastily bound him. As for the rabbit that was within it, it was discarded to the side without regard. It remained motionless as if it were unconscious. With this sudden entrapment, Han Li was unable to conceal the abrupt shock on his face. "Youngster, how do you like the feeling of ghost threads? Are you still able to use any of the magic power in your body?" The bone sage's proud laughter came from the cloud above. When Han Li heard this, he hastily felt for his magic power, but his face soon turned ashen. Chapter 452, Thunderous Strike. Han Li was incapable of drawing on any of the magic power in his body, feeling as if it were frozen. It was clear that those ghost threads had restricted his true essence. Han Li was overwhelmed with shock for a moment. He hastily turned his gaze to examine the black threads. The black threads densely coiling around his body were glossy and emitted a faint yin qi. Its baneful nature was clear at a glance. Han Li's face unconsciously twitched. It wasn't that he didn't suspect that it had been tampered with, but that after careful examination, he had been unable to find anything strange. As he didn't carry any pure gold magic tools on hand, he had no choice to use that item. After he used the item to capture the spirit Ginseng's avatar, his suspicions about the item had been thrown to the back on his mind for the time being. It was beyond his imagination that just as they turned hostile that his magic power and true essence would be completely restrained. However, his expression of shock only existed for a short moment before his calm was restored. That was because he immediately recalled that he still had the formation spell protecting him. He would have enough time to break free of the restraints before they could further act against him. Han Li scoffed and thought to call out to his gold-devouring beetles when he heard a puff from behind him. The sound was barely discernible. If Han Li hadn't earlier covered the area of the formation spell with his spiritual sense, he feared he wouldn't have discovered it. Feeling a chill run down his spine, Han Li sharply whistled and instantly rolled his body over. At that same time, the gold-devouring beetles filled the skies as they swarmed behind him. Upon hearing a loud explosion from behind him, Han Li's face grew gloomy. Han Li saw the swarm of gold-devouring beetles blocking the path of a strange dark green silhouette of light, and doing their utmost to attack it. The green light silhouette appeared blurred from having its body covered in ghost chi. Its arms had transformed into two huge, dark green pythons. They were wildly lashing out at any of the gold-devouring beetles that attempted to approach. As none of the beetles were able to approach him, the gold-devouring beetles were at a complete standstill. But what Han Li found even more inconceivable was that the formation spell was still completely intact. Just how was it able to appear behind him without triggering any of the restrictions? But before Han Li could recover from his shock, the green silhouette loudly cursed, "These damned insects are actually capable of consuming my incorporeal body. How menacing!" It was the same unfamiliar voice he had heard before, but now it was quite flustered. Han Li had finally noticed that in the instant the beetles were flung away, they had taken bites out of green pythons and had swallowed specks of green light. It was no wonder why he was so perturbed. In the mere time after it had just recently spoke from within the cloud, it had managed to conceal itself behind him and launch a sneak attack. Han Li was completely perplexed by this, but the question soon faded from his mind. Now was not the time to think of it. He had no mind to chat with the silhouette and whistled once more. A small portion of the gold-devouring beetles separated themselves from the group and shot towards him. They were crawling all over his body, tearing away at the black threads. Because his magic power was restricted, Han Li was only able to barely control the gold-devouring beetles by use of sound. He needed to set himself free before the enemy figured out a way to deal with his gold-devouring beetles. After all, the memory of the beetles, origin chi being greatly damaged by the ghostly roars, were still fresh in his mind. If such a thing were to occur again, it would be terrible. At that moment, the barrier seemed to be rammed by a heavy object. After flickering with yellow light, the light barrier started to blur. Han Li then indifferently glanced over. He saw the bone sage in midair, releasing his own attacks in coordination with the green silhouette's attack. The dark cloud continuously struck the light barrier with 3-meter-wide masses of black chi. It appeared that the barrier wouldn't last for much longer. A strange light stirred in Han Li's eyes. He no longer paid attention to the bone sage's assault and turned his gaze to the gold-devouring beetles that were blocking the flourishing green silhouette over 40 meters away. The yin ghost threads on his body had already been torn nearly halfway through in that instant. Han Li could already feel his true essence and magic power slowly stir, causing him to involuntarily reveal a trace of joy. Once his magic power returned to normal, he had many methods he could make use of. At that moment, the green silhouette released a soft roar and started spinning its body. In a second, it had turned into a huge top spinning at great speed. It charged into the swarm of beetles and slowly inched closer to Han Li. The 10,000 gold-devouring beetles continued to chase after it. Although a majority were quickly swatted away by the huge top, a small portion of them managed to cling onto it and slow it down. When the other beetles saw this, they swarmed around it. A short moment later, the green silhouette had gold-devouring beetles crawling over its body and was no longer capable of spinning. It looked just like when they had devoured the gray ghost shadow previously. Han Li was astonished. The green ghost's suicidal action not only caused him to feel joy, but also great apprehension. What happened afterwards verified his suspicions. In a breath's time, the green shadow's body that was being held down by the gold-devouring beetles started to inflate into a large sphere and glow with dazzling green radiance. Not good. Han Li wanted to recall the gold-devouring beetles, but it was too late. The green sphere emitted a deafening bang and released an extremely cold aura that submerged all of the beetles. The center of this explosion was shining with dazzling green radiance. Under it as cover, a fine wisp of green smoke shot out, quickly shooting towards the still-bound Han Li. "Your body will be mine." With roaring laughter, the green thread flashed, transforming into a meter-wide malevolent ghost head as it continued to charge towards him. As the bone sage saw this from up above, he wore a slight smile. He immediately stopped his attacks, despite being only a few strikes away from breaking through it. Han Li stared at the ghost head as it approached him with an icy, piercing gaze. When it arrived about 3 meters away from him, a ruthless glint appeared in his eyes and his body suddenly released a violent, baleful aura. This violent, baleful aura appeared nearly tangible and unexpectedly stopped the approaching ghost head from shock. Han Li suddenly opened his mouth and shot a dense bolt of golden lightning, penetrating through the ghost head at point blank. The ghost head wailed in anguish and immediately turned into a ball of green chi after being struck by the golden lightning. Furiously shrieking, it fled for its life. Han Li wasn't about to allow it to so easily escape. At that moment, his entire body was wildly releasing arcs of faint lightning. In an instant, the black threads had been thoroughly dispersed. His body blurred without delay. After leaving behind several afterimages, he had chased down the green chi. Han Li expressionlessly raised his right hand and fiercely clutched the ball of chi. Faint gold lightning sparked from his fingers and instantly erased the green chi from existence, leaving a dark green crystal pearl in his grasp. It flickered with a strange brilliance as if it were alive. Han Li indifferently looked at it for a moment before tightly closing his hand. The crystal pearl was then turned to ash from an arc of lightning. Without a corporeal body, even the Ghost King grade green shadow was destroyed in an instant by Han Li's unrestrained use of the divine Devilbane lightning. Even Han Li himself was surprised by how easy it had been. Then Han Li raised his head and looked at the bone sage with an unfazed expression. "Hand over the ninth spirit ginseng to me and I will pretend as if nothing happened, and we will continue our cooperation. Otherwise, one of us will have to die." Although Han Li's tone was serene, the cold intent of his words caused the bone sage to wear a grotesque grimace. The bone sage directly stared at Han Li for a long while before saying, "Good, good, good." Han Li unconsciously narrowed his eyes as he rigidly stared at him. Since he was unable to take over your body, his skill was insufficient. I will naturally cooperate with the victor. Take good care of the ninth spirit ginseng. The dark cloud concealing the bone sage disappeared to reveal his true body. He then flung a golden box at Han Li. Chapter 453, Zenith Yin's Intrusion. Han Li expressionlessly watched the box rebound off of the light barrier and fall to the ground outside. He didn't have the slightest intention of releasing the restrictions. He only solemnly stared at the gold box in complete silence. With his hands behind his back, the bone sage serenely spoke. What? You fear that the box is under the effect of ghost thread alterations. Relax. This old ghost has already given up. I can no longer act against you as I only have you left to assist me with Zenith Yin. The large number of gold lightning bamboo magic treasures that are contained within your body were particularly outside of my expectations. They will prove to be extremely effective when dealing with Zenith Yin's profound Yin arts. Harming you at this point would be harming myself. Han Li focused his sights on the bone sage. If he plotted against him once, he would naturally be willing to do it again for reasons still unknown. Although his words and actions were agreeable, it was best for him to remain vigilant. With that thought, Han Li raised his arm and shot a slim arc of faint gold lightning, striking the gold box with shock. After swaying several times, no odd transformations had occurred. Han Li let out a sigh of relief. If the box was transformed from something demonic, it would have undoubtedly shown a reaction. With his heart at ease, he beckoned to the box and the gold case shot towards him. At that same moment, the light barrier flickered, allowing the gold box to pass through in that instant. Han Li saw that the bone sage still had yet to move with his spiritual sense and had somewhat relaxed. He then lowered his head to look at the gold box. With a cold glint shining from his eyes, Han Li stared at the box in his hands, contemplating about something. When the bone sage saw Han Li's cautious appearance, he scoffed and leisurely watched from above without any intention of urging him. Han Li then looked down at the avatar of the spirit ginseng, the white rabbit. It was motionlessly lying on the ground as if it were unconscious. Han Li muttered to himself for a moment. Then, without any further hesitation, he gently flipped the cover of the gold box, revealing a sudden azure light shining from the box. The box then fully opened the rest of the way by itself and revealed what was inside. Han Li hastily focused his gaze on the small item before him. It was 1/2 a foot long and an earthy yellow with dry, wrinkled skin, appearing like one would commonly expect from the roots of an old tree. Han Li was speechless. While Han Li was doubting whether this truly was the ninth spirit ginseng, or whether the bone sage had replaced some unknown item to dupe him with, the motionless rabbit that was lying on the ground suddenly leapt towards him as an orb of white light, shooting towards the roots in the golden box. Han Li was initially surprised, but he soon revealed joy. The ninth spirit ginseng's white rabbit avatar's sudden actions clearly revealed that this item was truly the ninth spirit ginseng, causing him to feel assured. However, Han Li wasn't about to just ignore this avatar and allow it to fuse with its main body. He flicked his finger, striking the rabbit's head with a streak in azure swordlight. It tumbled off a distance away. But with its true body before its eyes, it leapt forward again with the entirety of its strength, completely unwilling to give up. Han Li grew somewhat impatient. He immediately shot off an arc of lightning, thoroughly knocking out the white rabbit. A large patch of its fur had turned black. Afterwards, Han Li reached in the direction of the white rabbit, causing it to fly into his hand. After taking a look at it, he decided to place it into the golden box. Once the white rabbit avatar touched the body of the ninth spirit ginseng, it merged into the ginseng with a flash of white light. Han Li then closed the lid and placed a minor restriction on it to prevent it from fleeing. With that done, Han Li released a breath of true relief. The bone sage's inaction caused Han Li to feel relaxed, but it had increased his wariness as well. After placing the golden box into his storage pouch, he calmly asked, after Senior gave the ninth spirit ginseng to this Junior, did he not fear that Junior would take it and run? The bone sage's wandering gaze focused on Han Li. He unhurriedly said, run. Even with the ginseng, what would you think to do without the formula to refine it? Han Li frowned and thought about what else he should say. The bone sage sneered and couldn't help but explain, Zenith Yin has already acted on your body. You can either be pursued to the ends of the earth or cooperate with me. Even if you left the Heaven Void Hall with the spirit ginseng, Zenith Yin would later. He. Acted on me? Han Li's expression momentarily changed. He didn't believe that his body could be affected by something without his knowledge, given his immense spiritual sense. The Bone Sage naturally guessed that Han Li doubted this and immediately smirked. But just as he was about to offer evidence, his expression abruptly changed, and he turned his gaze to the distance. Han Li was baffled by this, but he immediately felt alarm swell in his mind. He couldn't help but believe the old devil had sought to trick him. But for some unknown reason, the Bone Sage hastily turned back around and said something that caused Han Li to immediately tense. "Zenith Yin is coming, most likely for you. You're on your own. I'm going to conceal myself." The Bone Sage then turned into a dark cloud and flew off, disappearing in an instant. Han Li was dumbstruck. Just as he was pondering whether or not the Bone Sage spoke truthfully, he heard booming, ghostly wails from the horizon. A huge sea of dense black clouds imposingly covered the skies. It appeared that they were heading in this direction. Han Li's heart dropped. This dark cloud possessed the astonishing pressure of the profound Yin arts. It was most likely that the person who was coming was Grandmaster Zenith Yin. Could it be true that Zenith Yin had schemed against him without his detection? How else could Grandmaster Zenith Yin have flown such a far distance towards him with complete accuracy? At that moment, Han Li inwardly rained profanities at the Bone Sage. Wasn't he going on about wanting to cooperate with him to deal with Zenith Yin? Now he was left behind, abandoned with great speed. This caused Han Li to be beyond gloomy. Now that he had hid, it was too late for Han Li. He could only brace himself to cope with this directly. As Han Li remained inside the formation spell, the black clouds arrived above the forest in the blink of an eye and came to a sudden stop. With this, Han Li no longer had any choice. He could only silently stare at the dark clouds with a tense heart. He believed that Zenith Yin wouldn't kill him on sight and would be given a proper explanation of why Grandmaster Zenith Yin was so intent on pursuing him. After a long while of strenuous thinking, Han Li couldn't figure out why he was being chased, much to his annoyance. With that thought, Han Li recovered his calm state of mind, and he attentively gazed at the black clouds, waiting for Zenith Yin to speak. But contrary to his expectations, a cold snort came from the dark clouds and shot out a jet-black light beam towards the magic formation at a speed greater than lightning. With a flash of yellow light, the light barrier was thoroughly destroyed with a deafening rupture. It was unable to hold for even a second. Completely unobstructed, the black light beam directly struck at Han Li. Han Li's face became deathly pale in an instant. His body blurred several times out of instinct, and he dodged out of the way, appearing over 100 meters away with an expression of furious alarm. Han Li waved his arms without any further hesitation. Over 100 huge ape puppets appeared around him. He then twirled several spirit beast pouches around him, having them lightly sway in front of him. Han Li's gaze grew ice cold. Although he knew his chances of victory were pathetically small, if Zenith Yin truly wished to kill him, he still had to try his utmost. He was unwilling to resign himself to death. At that same time, 9 bamboo cloudswarm swords that were sealed in his body's true essence began to stir. Chapter 454, Enticement. The expansive black clouds appeared to be reacting to Han Li's hostile vigilance. They started to quickly swivel and started pulling back at the center of the clouds with a grand flourish of devilish chi. Han Li's heart trembled. Just as he was about to impatiently order his puppets to attack, he heard the Bone Sage's cold voice in his ear. "Youngster, don't attack him. He is merely giving you a show of his strength. He doesn't wish to truly kill you. Let's see what my traitorous disciples wants from you before you do anything else." The Bone Sage's voice transmission surprised Han Li, giving him a sudden realization. He then forcefully suppressed the restlessness in his heart and asked, "Great Senior Zenith Yin, for what reason has Senior come to find this junior?" Han Li's voice was gloomy and serene, possessing neither arrogance nor humbleness. "You're still calm despite receiving my attack. It seems you are quite courageous." Grandmaster Zenith Yin answer was besides the point. Han Li was unsure whether his words were that of praise or contempt. "As a nascent soul cultivator, if Senior wishes to exterminate Junior, my courage wouldn't make a difference." Han Li unconsciously frowned and replied with a calm expression. He felt slightly more at ease, knowing that the Bone Sage was hiding not far away. If he were to act together with the old devil who knew the weakness of the profound Yin arts, it would be possible to fight against Zenith Yin. Naturally, that would require the Bone Sage to assist him, which was something Han Li couldn't guarantee. As a result, he didn't possess the slightest intention of angering the Bone Sage. At that moment the black clouds eventually billowed away and flashed several times. Whoosh! The clouds disappeared to reveal a middle-aged man and a short, thin, and ugly youth, Zenith Yin and Wushu. You are Han Li, a rogue cultivator from Heavenly Star City. The middle-aged man looked at Han Li with interest. That's correct, I am Han Li, although it seems Senior already knows this. Han Li revealed a bitter smile and spoke with a tone of helplessness. Don't be anxious, I'm not here to look for trouble. It's not about that matter with the exquisite sound sect either. The previous attack was merely because I felt that formation spell was in the way, so I sought to break it. Zenith Yin spoke with an indifferent smile. What was in the way? Did you not merely wish to intimidate me with your immense strength? Han Li thought, completely aware of the truth, but contrarily he respectfully asked, then Senior is here for. As Han Li clearly understood that Zenith Yin was waiting for him to ask that, he could only hold his nose and play along. Zenith Yin chuckled upon hearing Han Li's question. After closely examining Han Li, he was able to sense his inward restlessness. Do you recognize what this is? Zenith Yin raised his hand, revealing a dense white ball. Without giving him a chance to clearly see what it was, he lightly tossed it towards Han Li. Han Li revealed slight confusion. When the item flew in front of him, he caught it with his sleeve and carefully brought it before his eyes. The item wasn't large and was badly damaged, but Han Li recognized it at a glance. It was a small amount of the pure white threads from the blooded spiders. Han Li blankly stared at it, baffled at why Zenith Yin had given this to him. But after some thought, he immediately recalled the battle that had occurred with the Hidden Fiend sect. When he was trying to escape the entrapment, he had used the blooded spiders to deal with a demon corpse that was blocking his path. That should have been when Zenith Yin had acquired this object. Why is he asking about this item now? Han Li's expression slightly changed as suspicions began to come to mind. However, as Zenith Yin wasn't going to give him much time to think, he could only answer honestly, I undoubtedly recognize this item. They're threads that my spirit beast shoot out. Why has Senior mentioned this? Han Li's expression was doubtful as if he couldn't bring himself to believe it. Zenith Yin revealed a smile upon hearing this. Good, very good. I came to look for you because I wish to see your spirit beasts. How about you take them out and let this Grandmaster take a look at them? Grandmaster Zenith Yin revealed a trace of excitement and spoke with a surprisingly gently voice. This caused Han Li to grow even more vigilant. This was because Han Li had caught a trace of well-concealed greed contained in his smile. It was only revealed for an instant before it faded away. Showing such an expression at the mention of his blooded spiders wasn't a good omen by any means. Although he felt even more restless underneath Grandmaster Zenith Yin's gaze, Han Li could only hesitantly force himself to agree. Well, no point in dragging this out, Han Li gloomily thought. He then raised his arm and lightly patted the spirit beast pouch at his waist. A white light then flew out and landed in front of Han Li. The light faded away to reveal a white spider the size of a millstone, fiercely observing its surroundings. When Zenith Yin saw the blooded spider, he continuously stared at it as if it were an extremely precious treasure. His expression gradually became happier. Great, it truly is a blooded spider, he. After a long while, Grandmaster Zenith Yin broke into wild laughter as he faced the sky, causing the nearby air to tremble. Han Li's expression involuntarily changed. The cultivation of a nascent soul cultivator was truly profound. However, Han Li soon wore a cautious expression. He knew that Zenith Yin was about to mention the true heart of the problem. But before Grandmaster Zenith Yin could speak, the Bone Sage's apprehensive voice was transmitted to Han Li's ear. How did you get that blooded spider? Why haven't you told me about this? The Bone Sage's voice was filled with regret and furious alarm. Why would I have told you that I possessed it? Han Li grew sullen. But he immediately calmed his mind and had second thoughts. Since the Bone Sage was also moved by it, it seems the blooded spider possessed a great mystery. Would the appearance of this unknown matter prove to be a benefit or detriment to him? As Han Li was inwardly mulling this over, the Bone Sage urgently sent him another voice transmission. That traitorous disciple Zenith Yin will definitely invite you to go with him into the inner halls. Do not hesitate to go with him. I will be secretly following after you and provide assistance. Perhaps sensing that Han Li's tone was unsettled, the Bone Sage's voice became much more gentle. When Han Li heard this, his heart became even more uneasy, contrary to the Bone Sage's intentions. He faintly felt that he was about to be dragged into a great maelstrom where he would meet a terrible death if he weren't careful. As these suspicions stirred in Han Li's mind, Zenith Yin eventually spoke as the Bone Sage had predicted. Han Li, do you wish to go to the inner halls? If you do, I will bring you through safely. Zenith Yin's voice was amiable and his words were filled with great enticement. Go to the inner halls, Han Li was astonished. It was a place that was said to be too dangerous for a core formation cultivator, but the treasures that it contained were far more precious than in other areas of the Heaven Void Hall. But after Han Li came to know of the particulars of that place, he had decided not to go. He was even more averse to braving the dangers of the inner hall now that he had just acquired the Ninecurl Spirit Ginseng, an item that greatly helped when congealing a nascent soul. Zenith Yin's offer to safely bring him through the inner halls, and the Bone Sage's exhortations for him to agree, were met with complete disdain and distrust from Han Li. He only had one life after all. After a moment more of pondering, Han Li declined with a forced smile. To this junior, the inner halls are truly out of reach. Junior will be satisfied with passing only 2 trials. As such, Junior will forego going to the inner halls. His luck is that good. Grandmaster Zenith Yin's expression sank, and his eyes became stern. At his side, Wu Chu loudly rebuked him with a scowl. Han Li, my ancestor didn't chase after you for your offenses during that previous matter. Now, you use excuses to refuse his kind offer to bring you into the inner halls. Could it be that you hold our Zenith Yin Island in contempt? Although Grandmaster Zenith Yin didn't stop Wu Chu, he wore a displeased expression and looked at Wu Chu with a cold gaze. Han Li grew silent once more. He again heard the Bone Sage exhort him to agree, causing even more distrust to swell in his heart. I won't go. Although I do not know why Island Lord Wu plans on bringing me into the inner halls, it definitely won't be a matter of only broadening my experiences. It would be better for me to use my time to look for treasures in safer areas. Han Li spoke with an indifferent expression. Chapter 455, Another Surprise. Humph, do you truly believe that you get to decide whether or not you can go? If you don't come with us, this young lord will kill you here. Did you truly believe that our Zenith Yin Island wouldn't dare to act due to the words of the Star Palace enforcers? Wu Chu's small eyes ominously glinted. Although Wu Chu had been previously warned by Grandmaster Zenith Yin, he still attempted to threateningly pressure Han Li. Wu Chu felt Han Li was truly displeasing to the eye. The malice he felt towards Han Li was nearly innate, born from no particular reason. Han Li found this feeling mutual. That recent outburst was merely met with an indifferent glance and did nothing to improve Han Li's impression of him. Paying no further heed to Wu Chu, he spoke to Grandmaster Zenith Yin. For a reason unknown to me, Senior requires this junior's spirit beast. But this junior is also well aware that if a spirit beast's master dies, their spirit beasts are incapable of recognizing another master. In addition, Junior is capable of ordering the blooded spider to self-detonate during a moment of crisis. Surely, Senior doesn't wish to see that. Han Li clearly understood that Wu Chu was merely playing the part of a paper tiger. As such, Han Li was unwilling to tango with Wu Chu and decided to speak with the true authority, Grandmaster Zenith Yin. However, this action by Han Li caused Wu Chu to fly into a rage from the humiliation. After a hostile expression appeared on his face, he spewed a slew of profanities at Han Li. But he was soon stopped by a wave from Zenith Yin. Good, I'm fond of juniors with courage and understanding. Since this island lord requires your blooded spider, I naturally won't drag you along without payment. Once we arrive in the inner halls, I will. Just as Zenith Yin was about to list his conditions, his expression suddenly grew sullen, and he stopped speaking. He turned his head around to fiercely stare in a certain direction with a malicious look on his face. Let this Grandmaster have a look at you, eavesdropper. Grandmaster Zenith Yin's voice was shrill and full of killing intent. He appeared extremely angry. Han Li felt alarmed. He immediately thought that the Bone Sage had been discovered and was unconsciously pondering about how he should deal with this situation. However, Han Li was surprised to hear an aged voice. Old pal Wu, there is no need to be so angry. I merely encountered you by coincidence. Don't tell me you're going to attack. 100 meters away in the air floated a Confucian-robed old man covered in an azure glowing light. It was someone Grandmaster Zenith Yin was quite familiar with, Layman Qingyi. Fellow Taoist Qing, you followed me. When Zenith Yin saw him, he grimaced and his killing intent faded. What, follow you? I was merely taking a stroll and happened to see fellow Taoist Wu and this young junior having a chat, so I thought I'd come over and say hi. I didn't think that I'd cause fellow Taoist Wu to be so unhappy. Had I known earlier, I definitely wouldn't have acted so rashly. The Confucian-robed old man dryly laughed and spoke with a completely unconcerned tone. He soon grew unconcerned with keeping up his own pretenses and turned his gaze from the pale zenith yin to the blooded spider. This is a blooded spider. It truly is a rare spirit beast. From the analysis of earlier cultivators, this is one of the spirit beasts that are most likely capable of acquiring the heaven void cauldron. Its odds are far greater than your fire serpent or Wan Tianming's gold-threaded silkworm. Layman Qingyi spoke, shaking his head. Taking a stroll nearby, while invisible, after hearing the old man's shameless excuse, Grandmaster Zenith Yin grew furious, but his expression only grew gloomier upon hearing Qingyi reveal the secret about the blooded spider. After turning his gaze away from the blooded spiders, the Confucian-robed scholar examined Han Li several times before saying, "So this is the junior that old Pal Wu was concerned with earlier. This old man is also quite fond of guiding courageous and insightful youngsters. I'm quite interested in taking him in as my disciple. How about it? I've never taken in a disciple before." Zenith Yin paled after hearing this. Take Junior in a disciple. Han Li blinked several times. He didn't know whether he should be excited or cynical. Zenith Yin's expression was icy, and threads of black qi began to surge from his body. He spoke each of his words forcefully while staring at the old man. "Fellow Taoist Qing, what are you planning?" I was only joking. Old pal Zenith Yin doesn't need to be so nervous. If I were to truly take this youngster as a disciple, I fear fellow Taoist would attack me without restraint. However, if Hu Manzi were to know of this blooded spider, would he back down? The old man chuckled. A strange expression appeared within his eyes as he played the matter off. Layman Qingyi's words initially caused Zenith Yin to relax, but upon hearing him mention Man Huzi, he started to feel a strong headache. Zenith Yin had originally planned to keep the blooded spider a secret and manipulate the others into driving the righteous Tao cultivators away from the inner halls, or have both sides suffer a mutual defeat. He would then use to the fire serpent to put on a display of being incapable of acquiring the treasure, while secretly using Han Li's blooded spider to secure it. He alone would acquire the heaven void cauldron. As for his previous promises, he had never intended on keeping them in the first place. But he didn't expect in the slightest that his meticulous plan would be thrown into disarray by this old cunning fox. He was uncertain about whether or not he could kill him to shut him up, and even if he were confident, he couldn't easily act and weaken his own side prematurely. After all, he still had the righteous Tao cultivators to contend with. Zenith Yin's face twitched when the old man mentioned Man Huzi. He had previously experienced just how fearsome Man Huzi's heaven-bearing devil arts were. Even with his newly acquired minor mastery of his heaven-wide corpsifier, he didn't hold any confidence in facing that man. If by chance that man were to use the pretext of taking in that youngster as a disciple, then he would insist on taking the lion's share of the treasure. He wouldn't have any way to prevent it, unless... Seeing that he was no longer able to preserve the secret of the blooded spiders, Zenith Yin started to think of how he wouldn't suffer a smaller portion of the treasures. At that moment, his heart stirred and he looked at the old man with an odd expression, faintly guessing the meaning behind his previous words. The Confucian-robed old man faintly smiled in response to his odd expression and transmitted a message to his ear. Zenith Yin's expression started to ceaselessly fluctuate. The old man's voice transmission was short, and he quickly resumed speaking out loud. "How about this proposal?" Without taking much time to think, Zenith Yin gloomily said, "Fine, I accept." The old man revealed a pleased expression and said, "Good, this is how it should be." He then glanced at Han Li and unhurriedly said, "Now, between the two of us, who do you think is more suitable to become his master?" After muttering to himself, Zenith Yin said, "Naturally, he will decide who will become his master. That would be a bit more fair." The old man blankly stared for a moment before revealing a strange expression, but after some consideration, he nodded his head in agreement. When Zenith Yin saw this, he wore a seldom-seen smile. He then turned towards Han Li and indifferently said, "You must have already heard our chat. Your blooded spider is something that we require in our treasure hunt, something that we cannot release under any circumstance. If you believe I won't kill you because you are the master of the spirit beast, then you are gravely mistaken. This grandmaster happens to know of a convenient method to refine spirit corpses. If worst comes to worst, I will kill the blooded spider and refine it into a demon corpse. Since the blooded spider's cultivation will greatly suffer from this, I won't do this unless I am forced. If you are afraid of any disadvantages that will result from being involved, then you can become either of our disciples and receive our protection. Also, you will acquire a portion of the treasure should we be successful in acquiring it. As you appear to be a smart fellow, you should know what to do. Zenith Yin calmly laid out both the carrot and the stick, causing Han Li's expression to change. In fact, Han Li was inwardly cursing without end. Ever since the Confucian-robed old man had arrived, Han Li felt ill at ease as if the situation had taken a turn for the worse. He had originally wished for the two eccentrics to fight amongst themselves, allowing him to slip away in the ensuing chaos. But he didn't expect for the cunning old foxes to reach an agreement after only a few words. Now, Han Li reckoned there wasn't the slightest chance that the Bone Sage would appear to help him. As for using the bludgeoned spider as a threat, it seemed it wouldn't have any effect. He reckoned that if he were to truly order the bludgeoned spider to self-detonate, Zenith Yin would rush to refine it. But as his life was hanging by only this thread, he couldn't afford to damn himself by angering these nascent soul cultivators. It seemed that if he didn't agree, he would only be met with death. Just as Han Li thought about saying something, he suddenly heard a voice transmission from layman Qing Yi. Han Li, this old man hasn't accepted a disciple in his entire life and doesn't have much longer to live. If you were to become my disciple, then my legacy, magic treasures, and all else will be inherited by you. You aren't going to come across such good fortune elsewhere. Layman Qing Yi's voice was full of allure. Han Li understood that his words were certain to be overstated, but he couldn't help but feel tempted. Before he could even think it over, he heard Zenith Yin's gloomy voice. Youngster, regardless of what the eccentric had promised you, I want to remind you that he is a rogue cultivator, one who treads the solitary path. Apart from a desolate island, he has few other possessions. Even if you were to inherit everything from him, it won't amount to much. However, my Zenith Yin Island is different. Not only are there many cultivators, but it also possesses grand influence. As my own personal disciple, you will hold an unimaginable amount of influence on the island. Regardless of whether it's beautiful pear cultivation servants or precious pill and tool ingredients, this Grandmaster will allow you to select them. I also saw that you were walking quite close to the exquisite sound sex fairy violet spirit. If you have any interest in her, it can be handled. So long as you pledge to be my disciple, I will personally bring her to Zenith Yin Island to become your furnace cauldron. These incentives should be much to your satisfaction. Zenith Yin was very direct, listing off many conditions in a torrent. However, this wasn't the end. The Bone Sage's voice soon entered his ear. Youngster Han, take my traitorous disciple as a master. That way, we can look for a favorable opportunity to kill him. Don't forget, I am the only person who knows the pill formula for the refinement of the Ninecurl spirit ginseng. You had best do as I suggest, otherwise. The Bone Sage's words were filled with an obvious threat. Han Li inwardly rolled his eyes. Each of them had ulterior motives, and he would suffer greatly if he wasn't careful. In his own mind, if he truly wanted to take a master, then he would naturally pick the Confucian-robed old man. Although he wouldn't receive many great benefits, he wouldn't become entangled with a hideous mess of relations. It would be far more peaceful, and he wouldn't be involved with any more quarrels. As for Zenith Yin's medicine pills, beautiful women, and techniques, Han Li wasn't particularly interested. The talk regarding fairy violet spirit interested him even less. But with the Bone Sage's voice transmission, Han Li had to carefully reconsider. Solidifying a nascent soul was his next objective on the path to immortality. Although it was still quite some time away, the pill recipe was still something that he had to acquire. With that thought, Han Li lowered his head and started muttering to himself, pondering over what was to be gained or lost. Han Li's expression changed several times over a short period of time before he raised his head. His next words were music to Zenith Yin's ears and to the disappointment of the Confucian-robed old man. This one has long heard of Zenith Yin Island's great reputation. Junior wishes to receive a few pointers from Senior Wu. Good choice, Han Li. This Grandmaster will first accept you as an unnamed disciple. When we later return to Zenith Yin Island, I will conduct a ceremony for you to become an official disciple. This profound yin ring is a set of ancient treasures that I acquired when I was young, and I've given it to each of my personal disciples. Since it is both a keepsake and a protective treasure, be sure to properly take care of it. Zenith Yin understood the value of striking when the iron was hot. He immediately took a dark gray ring off his hand and handed it over to Han Li. Han Li accepted it with slight surprise and carefully looked at it. The ring was just about as large as one would expect, but it was etched with a few mysterious talisman characters that released pale blue light. One could tell that it was unordinary at a glance. As Han Li felt joy, he heard the Bone Sage scoff. Profound yin ring. It seems my traitorous disciple has cleanly eliminated any traces of my existence. This was obviously an ancient treasure that I had bestowed upon him, the yin-yang rings. He actually changed its name. Humph, don't grow too excited. Although the yin ring can protect your body and repel attacks, the yang ring that he possesses can be used to restrain you. If you attempt to use it when you deal with him, you will only be meeting your own doom. When Han Li heard this, he didn't reveal any peculiarities as he respectfully paid thanks to Zenith Yin. However, he couldn't help but inwardly sigh. With such a deep and cunning schemer as Zenith Yin by his side, he must be exceedingly vigilant. Else, he would suffer a terrible fate. He now hoped that the Bone Sage truly had a method to kill Zenith Yin. Otherwise, he'd have to later join Zenith Yin Island and obediently become eccentric Zenith Yin's disciple. Besides, even if Han Li did want to become a genuine, obedient disciple, Zenith Yin might not be sincere in receiving him. Whether or not Zenith Yin would become hostile after all was done was yet another matter to be concerned with. Faithfully following after Zenith Yin was not an option. As of now, he could only improvise as events unfolded, since he didn't have the strength to do otherwise. Although Han Li was well aware that the cultivation world was where the weak were prey for the strong, he hadn't felt such helplessness since he was at Foundation establishment. He had previously found himself in perilous circumstances many times before, but he was able to use the entirety of his strength to overcome the odds. But if he were to now confront a nascent soul cultivator, he wouldn't stand the slightest chance. This all caused him to wonder whether he was born under cursed stars. However, this was a passing thought. He merely thought to follow after the Bone Sage and investigate the secrets of the map fragment from curiosity. Just how did he land himself into the eyes of nascent soul cultivators? Han Li slightly regretted his choice. Suppressing the deep grievances that couldn't be revealed, he forced himself to act excited and happy. Upon seeing Han Li wear the profound yin ring and respectfully thank him, Zenith Yin was quite satisfied. After discussing a few things with the old man, he had Han Li follow behind him. The day was nearly over. If they didn't hurry over to the canyon, they would be eternally trapped here. As such, Han Li retrieved his bludgeoned spider before flying across the horizon with the others. Along the way, Zenith Yin happily chatted with Han Li and took the initiative to point out a few mistakes in Han Li's cultivation, much to the benefit of Han Li. Han Li couldn't help but sigh. There was quite a huge difference in the path of cultivation for those with a guide and those without. When Wu Chu saw this, his face carried a trace of resentment. Although he attempted to hide it with all his might, Han Li was still able to sense his immense hostility. Still, Han Li pretended to be unaware of this and paid him no further attention. The four of them flew quickly. About 6 hours later, they arrived in front of a mountain that was about 10,000 meters tall. This extremely steep mountain was made of black and gray stones. The mountain was cleanly split at its center in a supernaturally fine manner. It was even split through the mountain's foundation, producing a huge natural canyon. But what was even more strange was the twinkling blue and red light that separated the center of the mountain into two. It appeared truly otherworldly from a distance. Currently, over 30 differently dressed cultivators sat at the entrance of the canyon in silent meditation. Their expressions were solemn as if they were waiting for something. Zenith Yin and the other three slowly descended at the center of the group. Han Li swept his gaze over them and discovered that the black-robed Yuan Yao was also among them. When Yuan Yao saw Han Li accompanying the nascent soul cultivators of the Devil Dao, she revealed amazement. When Han Li turned his gaze towards her, she flusteredly turned her head away, not daring to meet his gaze. Han Li was slightly surprised and faintly realized something. He then wordlessly turned his sights elsewhere. He didn't see Fairy Violet Spirit or that youthful male cultivator. It seems they returned to the pavilion without any intention of undergoing the paths of ice and fire. Although the meditating cultivators appeared solemn, they were calm and composed, each possessing an unordinary bearing. In terms of cultivation, a majority of them were superior to Han Li's. Although he didn't know how many of them possessed late core formation cultivation, he could tell that a majority of them held mid-core formation cultivation. As for those that possessed early core formation cultivation like Han Li and Yuan Yao, there were only 7 of them. However, all of them were collected and appeared full of confidence. After Han Li finished his observations, he slightly frowned. There were no other nascent soul cultivators present apart from Zenith Yin and Layman Qingyi. Seeing this, Zenith Yin found a good area and sat down. Wu Chu naturally followed and sat down beside him. Han Li, come rest beside your master, Zenith Yin spoke, assuming the role of Han Li's gentle master. Han Li didn't wish to approach the eccentric, but under Zenith Yin's gaze, he could only force himself to comply and sit beside him. Chapter 456, Becoming Zenith Yin's Disciple. Chapter 457, Heaven-Bearing Devil Arts. Just as Han Li sat down, he heard a sonic boom from the distant sky. Wan Tianming and the other two nascent soul-righteous Dao cultivators appeared and descended onto the ground. When they spotted Zenith Yin and Layman Qingyi, they sneered and gathered at another location. They were whispering to each other, discussing some secret matters. When Zenith Yin saw this, he snorted and soon closed his eyes shortly after. It was impossible for Han Li to be as calm as Zenith Yin. Instead, he turned his eyes elsewhere as if he were observing something. However, if someone were to attentively examine Han Li, one would find that his gaze was unfocused and that he was completely inattentive. In the time it took to finish a meal, 6 more cultivators arrived in succession. The 2 white-clothed Star Palace elders had also rushed over. Now, there was only one nascent soul cultivator that had yet to arrive, Man Huzi. In the next hour, Man Huzi had yet to appear, causing Wan Tianming and the other righteous Dao cultivators to look at Zenith Yin and Layman Qingyi with strange expressions. Despite this, they both still appeared calm. As Han Li was closer to the two, he was able to see a trace of apprehension in their eyes. Man Huzi's absence clearly worried the 2 devil Dao eccentrics, as they would prove to be no match against the righteous Dao without him. As time slowly passed, Zenith Yin and Layman Qing were no longer able to maintain their calm facades. Their expressions grew stern as they began to repeatedly gaze towards the sky. Although the sky didn't show any indication of time passing and was eternally bright, Han Li supposed that the day was about to come to an end. Could it be that Man Huzi, the top figure of the Devil Dao, met with some mishap in the Heaven Void Hall? Han Li wondered. Under the circumstances, would this prove to be favorable or disadvantageous for him? With the Devil Dao cultivators growing uneasy, the righteous Dao cultivators grew increasingly malicious. Soon, piercing whistles reached them from the distant sky. These whistles were extremely loud and became more frequent and shrill as time passed by, causing all the nearby cultivators to appear at a loss. But when Zenith Yin and the Confucian-robed old man heard this, their expressions relaxed and they looked at each other with a smile. The Confucian-robed old man smiled and softly said, "It seems that Man Huzi's mood is quite good. He should have acquired an unexpected harvest." Humph, what would be unexpected? At most, he would have plucked Genesis fruit without any complications. Zenith Yin shook his head and spoke without concern. Layman Qingyi smiled, but when he thought to say something, a sphere of yellow light flashed in the distant sky and streaked towards them like a shooting star. In an instant, everyone was gazing at the sky. Han Li's eyes formed a strange expression, containing hidden apprehension as he gazed at the sphere of light. Han Li couldn't help himself. The other cultivators that saw the might of the heaven-bearing devil arts for the first time also revealed expressions of shock. Under the cover of the yellow light sphere, Man Huzi appeared extremely strange, resembling a terrifying demonic god. Not only was his body emitting a blinding golden light, but his skin was densely covered in coin-sized golden scales. The scales appeared as luminous as pure gold and shined with a grand, chilling light, leaving an impression of being eternally indestructible. To Zenith Yin's side, Wu Chu gasped and spoke in a daze. "That's the heaven-bearing devil arts. It seems truly fearsome." It seemed he was quite in awe of Man Huzi's appearance. Zenith Yin coldly glanced at Wu Chu and said with slight annoyance, "Humph, it's merely a tortoise's shell. When I have refined the profound Yin arts to perfection realm, it will be no weaker than the heaven-bearing devil art." This suddenly caused Wu Chu to recall that his own ancestor was on bad terms with Man Huzi. Wasn't his praise of Man Huzi deliberately provoking Zenith Yin? He then repeatedly praised his master with an embarrassed appearance before keeping silent. In the sky, Man Huzi swept his gaze past them and immediately caught sight of Zenith Yin and the others. He dropped down towards them, causing the nearby ground to tremble upon landing. After landing, Man Huzi's scales retracted from his body, and his golden light gradually faded away. "It seems Brother Man had a very successful harvest. Why else would you be so happy?" The Confucian-robed old man cupped his hand towards him with a beaming smile. Man Huzi's excitement disappeared upon hearing the old man's question. He answered without hesitation, "Hee, I've made a few gains. I killed an ice-striped toad near the Genesis fruit tree. Its inner core will prove to be very beneficial towards my heaven-bearing devil arts." Zenith Yin and Layman Qing found this contrary to expectation. They looked at each other in dismay, not knowing whether he was speaking the truth. After a moment's pause, Layman Qing's previous smile was restored, and he said, "Then I must congratulate fellow Taoist man. If your heaven-bearing devil arts progresses, you will have the same strength as the arch-saint of the Six Paths and the heavenly star sages." Afterwards, Zenith Yin also congratulated him with a calm expression. Man Husey chuckled and was about to say something, but he appeared slightly baffled when his eyes fell on Han Li. He remained slightly baffled before his eyes strangely glinted and released a trace of astonishing pressure. Bearing the brunt of this pressure, Han Li instantly felt his body tense, incapable of moving as if each of his limbs were being weighed down by 1,000 kilograms. But what was most shocking to Han Li was the feeling of Man Husey's icy gaze seeing past both his mind and body. Han Li's complexion became deathly pale, and he reacted by circulating the Great Development technique. After a moment, his mind stabilized, returning a bit of blood to his face and restoring control of his body back to normal. Man Husey couldn't help but be astonished. He soon revealed a trace of pleasant surprise, but when he thought to do something else, Zenith Yin blurred and appeared in front of Han Li. Zenith Yin offsetted Man Husey's imposing pressure and calmly asked, "Brother Man, what are you doing? Why are you bullying my junior disciple?" Junior disciple? Man Husey blankly stared for a moment before appearing gloomy. After disdainfully glancing at Wu Chu, he bluntly said, "Zenith Yin, are you making fun of me? Apart from that youngster Wu Chu, what other disciples did you bring to the Heaven Void Hall?" He appeared as if he planned to attack if he were to be corrected. Man Husey, you misunderstand. Young friend Han Li has been taken in as a disciple by fellow Taoist Wu just today. It's no wonder why fellow Taoist man didn't know of it. Layman Qing hastily gave an explanation from the side. Currently, Han Li was very important to them. It was natural for him to prevent any mishaps from occurring. Zenith Yin, did I hear correctly? You took in a disciple while here. Man Husey expressed shocked and sized up Han Li twice through. Although he is only an in-name disciple as I've yet to conduct a formal apprenticeship ceremony, young friend Han Li is now a member of Zenith Yin Island. I hope brother Man won't treat me too harshly. Zenith Yin spoke with a slight smile. Man Husey blinked a few times, staring at Zenith Yin and Layman Qingye for a moment before turning his gaze towards Han Li. He then laughed and said, "Good, very good. This disciple of yours is quite good. Needless to say, his spiritual sense is several times greater than that grandson of yours. If you carefully foster him, he will have great prospects in the future. Great prospects indeed." That last sentence of his seemed to possess a deeper meaning. Zenith Yin and Layman Qing, you were at a complete loss and looked at each other in confusion. Zenith Yin frowned and slowly asked, "What does brother Man mean?" "There is no meaning. Your in-name disciple is quite good. Are you interested in giving him to me? I feel like this youngster is quite suitable for cultivating my heaven-bearing devil arts." Man Husey spoke without care, but those words greatly frightened his fellow devil Dao cultivators. Layman Qingye hastily changed the subject. "Brother Man must be joking. Young friend Han has already become a disciple of Zenith Yin. How can he be so casually changed?" Man Husey grimly laughed and stroked his beard. He suddenly spoke with a cold tone, "If you aren't willing, then let's forget about it. To tell the truth, accepting a disciple is far too troublesome for me. However, why did fellow Taoist Qing grow so anxious for a disciple of Zenith Yin Island? Could it be that this youngster has something that can't be revealed?" After this was said, the old man's expression momentarily changed before calmly glancing at Zenith Yin. Chapter 458, Paths of Ice and Fire. Zenith Yin's expression slightly changed. After a moment of silence, he calmly said, "Brother Man, since you have doubts, I won't conceal anything. My junior disciple will prove quite useful during our treasure hunt in the inner halls. I hope you will forgive him if he has offended you." Zenith Yin's words caused Han Li to be extremely annoyed. When could he have possibly offended Man Husey? Was it not Man Husey who had forcefully seized the jade pillar from him and left him with a bellyful of anger? Naturally, Han Li didn't dare to say this, and the words remained in his mind. With a wave of his arm, Man Husey lazily said, "Offend? I don't even recognize this youngster. There was no offense. I merely saw that his cultivation technique was quite interesting and I wanted to test it. But how can a core formation cultivator be useful in the inner halls? Are you duping me?" Zenith Yin frowned and hesitated for a moment. Afterwards, he gave Layman Qingye an indicative glance. Layman Qingyi faintly smiled and sent Man Husey a sound transmission. Seeing the two's secretive manners, Man Husey revealed slight disdain. But after he heard the transmission, his expression suddenly changed, and he looked at Han Li in shock. Man Husey then asked the old man a few questions with sound transmissions, and came to a sudden realization, revealing an icy expression. Man Husey narrowed his eyes and stared at Zenith Yin with a sharp gaze. He said in an imposing manner, "Zenith Yin, I was wondering why you would inexplicably take in a disciple. So it turned out you sure came up with a good plan. There is no need to be so angry, brother man. If you came across a similar matter, perhaps you would have used a similar method. In addition, we've revealed the matter to you and have no intention of monopolizing the harvest. We'll be relying on brother man in the coming treasure hunt," Zenith Yin calmly said. After a moment of thought, Man Husey's expression grew calm and he said, "If I don't take action, Wan Tianming and his group of hypocrites wouldn't give you a chance to take the treasure. So let's get the business out the way first. If you get the treasure, how are we splitting it? How about we split the treasure into 4, including young friend Han, each person will get a share?" Layman Qingyi had long considered this question and immediately answered. This answer caused Man Husey to become angry. With a derisive expression he said, "Qingyi, do you really think I'm so easily swindled? Do you really think that you'll be able to handle Wan Tianming when the time comes? And you actually want to split it evenly amongst us?" The old man sighed and responded with a chuckle, "Don't be angry, brother man. It's true that my thoughts aren't entirely fair. How does brother man feel it should be decided?" Man Husey spoke with a serious expression. "I don't care how much you all receive, I require half of the treasure. After all, Wan Tianming alone is more than enough to deal with the both of you. If I'm going to take him on, then it is only fair that I get half." Man Husey's words weren't surprising to Zenith Yin and the old man. They had clearly expected him to make large demands. Zenith Yin unhurriedly said, "An entire half. Brother man's appetite is truly great. But don't forget that without my junior disciple's assistance, our odds of acquiring the treasure are pathetically low. My disciple also requires a share. Humph, a core formation cultivator also gets a share among us." Man Husey disdainfully glanced at Han Li. Han Li's expression stirred for a moment before calming down. If he were only a rogue cultivator, he obviously wouldn't be entitled to a share of the Heaven Void Cauldron's treasures. But since he is my disciple, he will get one. Zenith Yin was unwilling to back down. A stern expression appeared on Man Husey's face. Just as he thought to say something, the old man rushed to propose a compromise. "There is no need to fight. How about this? When we acquire the treasure, we'll split the treasure into 5. 2 shares will go to brother man and the other 3 will go to the rest of us. Surely that is fair." Man Husey blankly stared for a moment, before stroking his beard in silence. Zenith Yin immediately declared his position with a heavy voice. "I find these conditions acceptable. What do you think, brother man?" "Fine, although I am still not satisfied. It is better than the previous proposal." Man Husey wrinkled his brow and spoke with an annoyed tone. He had already figured out that Zenith Yin and the old man had joined hands, and that the proposed conditions were likely their bottom line. As such, he was unable to pressure them too strongly. As the Devil Dao eccentrics were discussing how to split their not yet acquired treasures, Wan Tianming and the righteous Dao cultivators were also having a secret discussion about the treasures. "Sect Master Wan, how certain are you that your gold-threaded silkworm will be able to take out the Heaven Void Cauldron? There have been many experts in the past that thought to acquire this treasure, but not one of them were successful. I fear we will also be unsuccessful." Taoist priest Tian Wuzi spoke with worry. Wan Tianming calmly said, "Be at ease. While my gold-threaded silkwork doesn't have high odds, we did acquire the sky azure flower. So long as I feed it to the silkworm when we acquire the treasure and overexert it, we will have at least a 4% chance of success. That can already be considered high. This humble Taoist also knows of this. I merely felt ill at ease when thinking of this matter. I am ashamed. It seems my own cultivation is lacking and my mind must be further polished." Tian Wuzi spoke with slight embarrassment. Wan Tianming chuckled. I am also deeply worried that those 2 old freaks, the heavenly star sages, would acquire the treasures of the heaven void. It only human nature as we are mere cultivators. We aren't desireless like true immortals." The old farmer then said, "However, Sect Master Wan had better keep watch on those Devil Dao cultivators. They are secretly talking about something. They seem to have just had some internal strife, but now they are bantering as if nothing happened. Are those devil Dao cultivators scheming something? Having heard this, Wan Tianming looked at the devil Dao cultivators in the distance who had finished their negotiations and scoffed. Then with a solemn expression he said, "While the techniques and might of the devil Dao are powerful, their temperaments are easily distorted. A few strange displays isn't out of the ordinary. There's nothing to make a fuss about. Even if we fail in our attempt, we must also make sure that the heaven void cauldron doesn't fall into the hands of the devil Dao. After all, Zenith Yin's mutant fire serpent is also a spirit beast capable of acquiring the treasure. Sect Master Wan speaks truly. If the devil Dao acquires it, they will flourish. Given the current weakness of the Star Palace, we cannot allow the devil Dao to replace the Star Palace as hegemon of the scattered star seas." Tian Wuzi repeatedly nodded his head. Wan Tianming was very pleased and thought to say something more when the blue-red light from the huge mountain suddenly flourished. The walls near the entrance to the canyon started to tremendously shake, splitting open two separate passageways. It seemed that they lead into the canyon. A meter-tall stone slab emerged at each of the entrances with the words Path of Profound Crystal and Path of Molten Rock in ancient characters. Suddenly, the cultivators closest to the entrances hurriedly took a step forward. Those that approached the entrance to the Path of Molten Rock grew light-headed and felt their mouths dry from the gust of scorching heat that flew past them. As for those near the entrance to the Path of Profound Crystal, it continuously emitted a white, ice-cold aura. The faint whistling of harsh winds caused one's heart to grow cold. Upon seeing the paths appear, Zenith Yin stood with roused spirits. He spoke to Han Li with a caring voice. "Han Li, let's go. We will gather up again on the other side of the paths of fire and ice. Although I am incapable of personally bringing you through them, I will give you a treasure to resist either the cold or heat depending on what path you choose." When Han Li was traversing the ghost mist, he had been informed about the paths of fire and ice by Fairy Violet Spirit. He knew that after setting foot in the passage, he would be teleported to a predetermined area in the canyon. There was very little chance that he would be teleported together with others as had been reaffirmed by Zenith Yin. After some thought, Han Li slowly said, "I will walk the path of molten rock. I happen to possess some fire-resistant clothes that might prove to be useful." Zenith Yin took out a deep blue jade pendant from his storage pouch without hesitation and handed it over to Han Li. "All right, take good care of this. With this item, you should have no problems passing through the trial, given your cultivation." When Man Husey saw this, he insincerely smiled and said, "This is truly unexpected. Such a miserly person as Zenith Yin actually showed a moment of generosity. Is that your white rhino emblem?"